No, we didn't agree to it as a group. I was promoting that as an idea. We're moving past it.
Because this is a dictate coming from you that we are now not allowed to go through and give our 5 minutes. What is 5 minutes? I'm asking because that is absolutely what we discussed last week. We agreed to that. We even talked about the format, and then we get this agenda and it's nowhere on there.
Yes, ma'am, that is a change. We did not go through the discussions last week. This is the agenda for this week.
Don't you think you should ask everybody if they agree with that, since this is what we're supposed to be doing together as a group?
Well, I think at this point we can move to amend the agenda. And if you want to move that we go back to the proposal of doing discussions, I'd be happy to second it.
I do move for that.
Can we have some discussion? How about if we move forward, and we can always at any point, I mean, my discussion points are things that have to do with our deliberations, so we can pull it into our deliberations, especially since we've got this whole issue of the alternates now. So perhaps we should just incorporate that into the deliberation phase.
I think a lot of the deliberation phase, that information could be taken care of by us going around. We wouldn't even need to. If we go around and there's a consensus on something, there's a consensus. We don't even have to go into that deliberation phase. Otherwise, what we're doing then is every single time a new topic comes up, we're going to be having another 5, 10 minute, whatever it is, presentation individually. I think it takes more time to go it this way than it is just to get it all out there, see where we're at, and then start from that point.
Move your cell phones away from the mics.
Is that better,
Sherry.
Nancy? Is that better?
Yes, so far.
Any further comments?
I had a question, though.
Yes, Brian.
Maybe a comment. I was just a little, I was trying to read into this agenda, the best of intentions that you were trying to get at what we were doing, but I don't know, so I had questions about it. I didn't know what your intention was. I thought we were all going to have, as we had discussed before, just go around the table. It sounded like kind of like around the campfire, we're all gonna, exchange view here. So I didn't know if this represented a change, and I was trying to give you the benefit of the doubt there, but
This
sounds
does
like it is
represent a change, yes. We were going to do that. We have delayed 2 weeks. We are losing time. We need to move on toward the actual deliberation rather than the presentations.
So, isn't the presentation
Why?
deliberation?
We have a time limit.
Yeah.
We have a year.
Are
We
you
have over
concerned
6
about running
months.
past May?
We have to prepare a decision. We have to prepare a recommendation. We have to give 4 weeks' notice. We have to have a public hearing. Then we have to have further deliberation. Then we have to write up the report and submit it.
Well, we can write the report before the public hearing.
Well, I would take the public hearing as being something significant, so that I would not recommend writing the report before the hearing.
Well, we can always edit it afterwards, is what I'm suggesting.
Can I just add, I think what Kristen said makes a lot of sense to me also, because I have comments, and I can give you 10 minutes of comments or 5 minutes of comments, I could do that. But they're on each of the points that we will have to discuss. And it may be more beneficial if, when we're going to talk about the sheriff, to Tamara's point, we may have very similar thoughts, and if everybody goes around and says we want to do X, we could be done in a minute or 2. But if we talk about it now and then not get to some of these things until later, I may not remember everything everybody said about it at that time. So I don't worry about we could spend tonight and do that. I just think it's more productive and more beneficial to address it as every topic we do, we just address it.
Brian?
Here's something for additional consideration. Maybe it's a friend.
You speak up a little bit.
Oh, sorry, Bob. Let me put that over there. Not just sitting next to you and cure that.
A little harder.
Yeah, I get you. I'm getting there. So I had this idea, maybe friendly amendment. It doesn't mean that people wouldn't deliberate, so don't misunderstand what I'm suggesting. Okay, it means people still deliberate, but I think it would facilitate the discussion by just simply asking outright. And it's premised on the statute, which says, if you're not gonna recommend a form of government, right, then the report that you issue doesn't need to explain really anything. It's right in the statute.
Correct.
It's only if you recommend some change that you have to compare that with what we have now and go through an, pros and cons, right? But hypothetically, folks here could come to agreement that no change is needed, in which case you really don't need to write much up other than a recommendation of no change. So, to get to the point, this would help, I think, facilitate discussion and deliberation, which is a straw poll, non-binding, by show of hands, that asks who among the voting members does not recommend any change in the form of government from what we have now. And by any change, I don't mean like some of the things we've discussed about, well, the Kootenai County Commissioners already have authority to hire a manager. No, I mean optional form changes. Who among us who's a voting member, by show of hands, votes not to change anything along what's allowed under the optional forms? I think that outset, a straw poll like that, would, just give us a sense of where people stand, and lead us into the deliberations in a way that we're aware of that, and I think people can listen attentively based on sizing up that straw poll. So I would suggest that as a friendly amendment. I would put it as if we were going to go with the structure you had, which I thought was based on what we had discussed, but apparently it's a little different. But I would put that as the question preceding even going into any deliberation. And it is not intended to cut off deliberation. I want to make clear, it's not to hurry things up and say, oh, be quiet, I've already got the sense of the room. It's meant to facilitate it.
We have a motion on the floor, and unfortunately, Brian, I don't think what you were saying was directly related to the motion. However, if you would amend the motion to pick up what Brian said, that is something we could do.
I guess it's a friendly amendment to the amendment.
I'm totally confused now. I think we need to start being really clear with each other. I'm not even sure what that motion was, let alone an amendment to
Well, I
that
took
motion.
the time to explain it.
But I would think, I thought thought you wanted us to discuss. If we're gonna put something out there now, then we do need to discuss, because I don't understand why we would do an up and down vote on anything without discussion.
I did not say it was a vote. I said it was a straw poll that was non-binding. If you didn't hear that, please hear it now.
Well, I don't,
Kristen,
I guess I don't know what that means.
If I can step in here. What we have is a motion on the floor from Tamara that we change the agenda to have a round robin of positions. That was seconded by Kurt. What Brian has suggested is, instead of doing the round robin of that we do a straw poll to determine if any of us don't want to change or do want to change in the optional form of government. Yes.
That makes sense, if that's.
Yes, Nancy.
Any changes to the agenda must be on an emergency basis. If it is not an emergency, that must be held until the next meeting, and it can be properly agendized.
Okay. I don't believe either of these two is an emergency. Would anyone state that it's an emergency? Then I
I
take
would
it
like-
we cannot make the changes to the agenda.
Well, what's the definition of emergency? I mean, let's be realistic here. I would like to know on that, because we had an
What's your
idea.
definition of emergency that you think we need to change the agenda?
A lack of transparency and not really any type of heads-up notice that the agenda was completely changed to what we had previously as a group agreed to
The agenda was
discuss.
published Friday or Monday, I can't remember which one it was actually published. It's been available to everyone since then.
See, I think,
There is no lack of transparency.
I don't know the technical or definition of emergency, but the intent of the open meeting law was to notice the public what we're gonna be talking about. And there are some times when, due to a crisis or some kind of unforeseen thing, that the commission would have to cover something that cannot wait until to another time. I think that's the intent of it on that. So if you use that definition, this was, we noticed the public what we are gonna talk about today. They made a reasonable expectation to come or not come based on what the agenda has indicated, and changing it could disadvantage some people who may have been more interested in what you're proposing, Tamara. That's the only thing. And again, we could accomplish it through, we could give our opinions through the individual components of the agenda items we have here today. So when we talk about the commissioners, the number, let's say, or the sheriff or the prosecuting attorney, we can go and say, before we go and do a roll call vote, or however you would do it, we would go and say, let's go around and talk about what do people think. And you could go and do it. So you can accomplish it within the framework of here, I believe.
Is there any issue and if there's a conflict of this with what was posted in the minutes?
No, I don't think so. But I think that we should probably be less specific and just call out that we are going to be having deliberations rather than saying we're going to talk about A, B, and C. Because if somebody is indeed choosing whether to attend or not attend based on whether item D is on the list, I think that's unreasonable. I think we need the flexibility to discuss the things that we find pressing in a given evening. I think trying to be this specific and trying to be this directive to our discussions is counterproductive.
And anyone who was here last week would have anticipated that we were going to discuss something different than is on the
Correct.
agenda. Brian?
Are we on the approval of the agenda?
Yes.
So, right.
We're still
We're
on
still
the
there.
approval of the agenda.
So I just wanted to check in on that. We're on the approval of the agenda, and I mean, you know, this is different, as you acknowledge, from what the group had understood was going to be the process we followed this evening. And if this is a thing that winds up as a motion to approve the agenda, I mean, I don't know, either table it or take a vote and people don't agree with it. I don't know, or maybe they do. I don't know. I'm just trying to move forward here.
I would like to move forward also.
But either it's tabled, which is,
Well, if we don't approve the agenda, then what?
Then we have no meeting.
we have early dinner,
Yeah.
something like that. But
We have a motion. Thank you. We have a motion on the table,
Yes.
okay? And a motion, if I understand it correctly, and I don't know if the round robin is the right way, is the motion is to allow each individual to provide a short overview of what they heard and go back to what originally was the plan last week. Is that pretty much it, Tamara? Okay. And that motion was made by Kurt and
Yeah,
seconded.
Tamara made it, I seconded it.
Sorry, Tamara made it and Kurt seconded the motion, okay. So I think the next thing would be to vote on that motion. And if the motion carries, then what we have to do is figure out what the next steps. If the motion doesn't carry, then we proceed on until somebody, and I think you have to, the motion's on the table, something has to happen to the
Well,
motion.
and I also, I mean, Nancy, what you gave us for input about you can only change the agenda under an emergency situation, that doesn't quite square with the training we got regarding open meeting law and what the notice requirements. I mean, granted, it's been 6 months since we had that training, but it seems like these are procedural matters, not content matters.
For open meeting, you can only discuss items on the agenda. So if you want to modify the agenda, it has to be for emergency purposes. I can look up the information
Based on that, I don't believe that the motion is in order. The motion is not in order, therefore it's
Yeah.
dead.
Well, it also begs the question of why the hell do we approve the agenda?
If there's an emergency item.
Oh, come on. That's bogus. There is no approval. It's either we have the agenda or we don't have a meeting.
Well, I believe, I'm not going to vote to approve this agenda because I don't see, number one, how we can separate all of these things out. They all interrelate. And Mr. Felios, for example, when he was here, included them all and had a scheme of which items needed to all be included. So I don't know how we can separate them out. And the public was told last week that we were going to be discussing them all. So I would not vote to approve the agenda.
Well, let's vote for approval or disapproval of the agenda then. I mean, that's
Okay.
the question, is
So it's just
a vote on approval.
It's just a flat approving the agenda as submitted.
Yeah.
Or not approving the agenda as submitted.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Is discussion on the agenda, on the motion over, or can I make a comment?
Make a comment.
Okay. My understanding, and I think along the line of what Tamara was saying, is that we would each have time to discuss kind of a general analysis of what we've seen over the past 6 months. Now, the 3 items that are on the agenda are part of what we've seen for the past 6 months. And the issue is, they come around, okay, they talk about the commission. I'm assuming the intent is to go around, discuss how you feel about that. And because these are items that were discussed and seem to possibly have more support and rule out a whole lot of arguing over this or that, we could go forward and get something set. But I don't think we can, under any circumstances, treat it as, oh, we're going to change the form of government, period. We're going to have to do it piecemeal. Are we going to allow a manager? What kind? Are 5 commissioners enough or 3 more than enough? You know, everyone appointed. I mean, we have a sheriff to be elected and a prosecutor to be a prosecuting attorney. I sure as though anyone disagrees with that here. So there are certain points that we can probably agree on, and I think if we go around and ask that, and each one gets to say a few words, that is basically following the intent of what was proposed. And I just think we ought to proceed forward and stop dilly-dallying around and wasting another evening.
I believe we were going to vote on a motion to
Now, I
approve
just
the
want to
agenda.
confirm, since the motion changed, is it still Tamara and Kurt?
No,
Okay.
the
okay.
only motion that's on the table at the moment is to approve the agenda.
Okay, so
published.
who made that motion?
It's part of the agenda.
Okay, so the motion is gone away,
Right.
tabled, whatever the right.
No, it's out of order. It just is as if it
Removed.
didn't happen.
It's
Yeah.
been, okay.
Right.
I thought that's what,
No, not if it's determined to be out of order.
I,
I mean, if you want, Tamara, are you willing to withdraw it just for a straight up vote on approving the agenda?
No and yes. No, I think the argument stands, but if it's not allowed under the legal proceedings, then if it's not emergency status, it's an ongoing pattern by our chair to constantly change things. And it's frustrating, Dave. You do this all the time and you've done it for months. And you accuse some of us of politicizing this panel. But it comes from you. It's stunts like this, when the public had something completely different. We had something completely different. But then you throw this out. I can't trust where your incentive is coming from this. There is an agenda with the agenda. And it's just, I would like to see a little more accountability from everybody, but directly from you. And stop pulling these stunts. You've done dictates to us throughout this whole thing, some of it to silence me. And I think you know by now that's not going to happen. It's just, you are causing this panel to really become a very difficult commodity in our community. And it is for the benefit that we're supposed to be doing this, but it is negative every single time we show up. And as you're the chair, the buck stops with you. This is not right. Stuff like this is not right. Yes, we can go around and we can pick things out individually. But I think having everybody be able to give their opinion in full, not piece and parcel it, is not appropriate. That's what we have been discussing this entire time, multiple times. So if it's not an emergency and it has to be withdrawn, fine, I withdraw it, but it's under protest.
Mr. Chairman, can I make a comment?
Bill?
Chairman, I have to disagree with you on that. I believe the chairman has made a concerted effort to make sure everyone gets to comment on everything we do. I'm not sure what all these changes are. I haven't seen them. He comes, he tries to run an orderly meeting. Everyone gets to speak. He tries to make sure that the public sitting here is not interfering with anyone's question, and yet allow the 35 or 37 to speak when they got here. And Mr. Chairman, you're doing a great job as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Phil, that's because you haven't been demeaned, belittled, ostracized, completely just cut off, interrupted multiple times from the very beginning, from the very first meeting. So I can understand your viewpoint in the sense that that hasn't happened and you don't see that. But from where I've sat, and actually a lot of these people, and a lot of them are strangers who come up to me, ask, what in the world is his problem because of his treatment personally towards me? So I respect your opinion on that because you haven't had to deal with that, but it is a totally different game over here, and I have had to deal with that.
This commission has become,
Yeah, there's something wrong.
Is there a speaker above you that's getting the feedback going through?
well, should I take it and move?
Stand up and talk.
Okay.
It's nice to move around anyway.
I might have to. All right. I'll stand over here, even though I'm not happy standing. I've got lots of things whirling in my brain right now. Tamara, I know what you feel, but I feel the same from some of my colleagues in terms of when I've tried to speak, I've been shut down or told that I didn't word something appropriately. It's not just you, and it's not one side. We have devolved into, rather than being a citizens commission, we have devolved into either individual or some sort of like partisan groups, and we're picking at each other. We're nitpicking words. Maybe we need to pull back and assess as a group how we accommodate everybody's wishes at this point within a particular time frame. I'm willing to give this a long night. If you want to say, if these people want to say something, shove it down to like 3 minutes or 5 minutes. Some of us may choose not to, but if you want to speak, get it over with, speak, and then we'll move on. Because I actually don't know that it's going to make much difference. I don't know that what you say would convince me. If it's just a 3-minute blurb or a 5-minute blurb, it might, but it's probably going to engender more questions back and forth. Because if I've been sitting here for all these months and I have an idea in my brain, and I've heard from my colleagues in terms of what they think, I think a 5-minute blurb from someone's probably not going to change my mind. But to your point, maybe we get an idea of what the feeling is around the table. Maybe we're all sitting here right now thinking we know what other people are thinking, what they want, and what their motivation is. And I bet we don't know. I think we all want what's best for this community. Some of us have put, and I'll pat myself on the back, some of us have put a lot of time into this. We've looked external to the community to find resources. We've done a lot of reading. We haven't just listened to our insular comments here. The comments here are important. It's important to hear from people. But there are other people out there, as you say, people who come up to you. People come up to me when I'm out there walking about who aren't coming to the meetings, and they might have a different view. So, we've got to get to the point where we come up with a decision. It's either a decision to do nothing, and then I guess we're done and we go home and we have a happy Christmas, or we decide we might want to make some changes. If we do, then we owe it to the voters, since this is a legal process, to put it out there and let them vote. I keep hearing from folks that we want to shut down the right to vote. No, we don't. We want to actually give you the opportunity to decide the future of Coeur d'Alene. And quite frankly, I think we all know it's not looking so good right now in terms of some of the decisions that are being made and some of what we're going to face. You know, we have long lines everywhere. We have crowds everywhere. We've got people fighting each other in terms of what's going on in the schools. You know, we need to, as a community, come together. I bet we're not really that far apart, but we have just gotten in our little silos and we act like we are. You can say I would hope that local government can be different. We can be civil. Forget federal government. Forget the national, forget even state. You know, people get on their sides and they scream at each other. They call each other names, they malign each other. Can we not do that in our own community? Can we just sit here and figure out what collectively we think would work? Now, ultimately, we're gonna vote. And you gotta have 5 versus 4, okay? But could we at least civilly, without maligning each other? I think we're all here doing the best we can. Can we just be civil? Because I'm embarrassed by this process. I really don't want to come here anymore. I'm coming because it's a good cause and I've been asked to do it, but I'm not, you know, this is not something I feel really good about, because I feel like I'm coming to do battle. And there was an individual who came here like the second or third meeting who basically told us that, didn't he? He sat up there and he said, "You're going to do battle." Well, why would that person have done that? Why should we then have picked up that mantle on one side or the other? We are not doing battle. We are friends, we are neighbors, and it's time to act like it.
Further discussion or?
Funny. It's funny, Bruce?
Actually, it is funny. It is funny. You know why?
Hold it down out there. We are having the meeting.
You talk about maligning people. We could start with your husband and his stupid emails that he sends me, okay? That's where you can start.
That's inappropriate, and he was
It
defending
is
me.
inappropriate for your husband and your wife to be
see?
sending me text messages and emails that are threatening and intimidating and all that kind of stuff. So please don't be throwing stones in a glass house, lady, okay?
Excuse me. Yes, children. Excuse me. My husband, how am I trying to steal your vote? I'm trying to give you an opportunity to vote.
Hey, let's hold it down a moment. Point of order.
I'm asking for us to focus back on our agenda tonight, and we shouldn't really be engaging with the public at this point.
You're right.
I agree.
Thank you, Joan.
Well, that's right. You don't have a voice. You do have a voice, but it's not the right time.
Moving back to the agenda, we're going to take a vote on whether to approve the agenda. Approve it. We have 5 to approve. It is approved.
Do we have a motion?
Motion to approve the agenda has been approved.
You think that's funny? I actually did recommend something different.
Nobody, just take the motion.
Draw the line, make it political, be rude, make it personal.
And I'll second it.
Okay.
Okay.
Children, let's hold it down here.
So, and just to clarify, Bob made the motion to approve as submitted, and I seconded it. And it's a 5 to 4 approval.
Excellent. Moving on to the announcements, anything? Straight on to the approval of the minutes?
Actually have a question. On, the last word for you, Kurt, it says specious. I'm just asking for clarification on what you meant by that.
Sorry, which page?
Look underneath your paragraph, so 1, 2, 3, 5, top of page 5, last word for that sentence.
Yeah, I actually did check, that was the word.
Top of page 5.
Top of page 5.
The very last word he thinks is specious.
Yes. What you're curious is not related to what's going on.
Okay, thank you.
Brian?
Dave, again, thanks for putting these minutes together. I know it's a lot of work. 2 quickies on page 4. Top of page 4. First line, 8th word, currently reads available. It actually is meant to be unavailable, and it's unavailable.
When members become unavailable.
Yeah, and then same page, page 4, lines 13 and 14. You can just scroll down, and it's line 13. It talks about distinguishing between the public participation and, as we move into, it should be public participation phase. Phase is the word to insert there.
So right after public participation.
Yeah,
phase
put in
and-
phase, and then insert the deliberations phase into which we are heading. The deliberations phase into which we are heading, period, and just strike the rest of the sentence.
Okay, in which we are heading.
Into which we are heading, yes.
In which we are heading.
Into which?
Into. Thank you.
Yeah, the deliberations phase into which we are heading. Yeah, period. And then the rest of the sentence just goes away. Okay, thank
So
you.
I got those 3 changes, unavailable, participation phase, and after deliberation phase, into which we are heading.
Yeah, I think you got it.
Okay.
Any other issues with the minutes?
Move to approve.
Second. Okay, vote to approve. Looks unanimous. We have the minutes. We have no reports, we have no old business. We move on to the legal opinion. We have been told that if we intend to discuss the actual opinion, we must have an executive session, which means we would have to clear the room. I see no reason to discuss the actual opinion unless someone else has a purpose there. We can discuss the summary without having to clear the room. Moving on. Bryant, would you like to open up
With the opinion,
with the opinion?
my opinion of the opinion?
Anything that doesn't discuss the actual opinion itself, just the summary.
Well, I think the summary was pretty clear, and I've changed my position on the role of the alternates from this point forward. And so those are really all the thoughts I have on it. I thought the summary was fairly clear.
Dave,
Okay.
may I suggest that we read the summary into the record, because I'm not sure that that has been publicly available, so they really don't have context for what we're talking about.
Good point.
I believe this is it here. It was an email on November 1st from Nancy Pluff. The summary reads, Idaho Code 742022 defines deliberation as the receipt or exchange of information or opinion relating to a decision. If you are discussing items of a general nature that are impromptu or informal and do not specifically pertain to the topic that is pending, it is not considered deliberations. If your discussions are leading to a decision, that is considered deliberations. There is no distinction between recommendations, discussion, or deliberations. All deliberations must be conducted on the record and in a public meeting. There is no requirement for a public hearing prior to the final meeting to approve the study commission's final report. The public hearing could happen at the same meeting as the final vote. The only requirement is that at least one public hearing has taken place before the final report is submitted. Idaho Code does not provide for the inclusion of alternates on the commission. He suggests that alternates should be passive participants and should only participate when called to step in for a member who is no longer able to participate. Alternates should not be included in deliberations. He also suggests that if a primary member is unable to continue, alternates who have attended all meetings and have been fully engaged should be given primary consideration for replacement. The attorney does not recommend replacing any primary member with an alternate without good cause unless they are unable to continue. This could be seen, I believe it should say, as exerting influence or control over the study commission members. Satisfactory?
Yeah, thank you. I forgot to turn the mic on. So now that we have that background, now we can discuss.
I had one additional
Certainly.
one additional concern, and that is, have we been deliberating all these past few months with participation by the alternates? And if not, then we're fine, and if so, then what is the remedy?
I don't believe we have been moving toward an action. We have been taking information. There have been questions to clarify. We have not, at this point, started discussing whether or not we intend to go, for the sake of argument, with an appointed or an elected sheriff.
And I would tend to agree.
So I don't believe we have been in deliberations. However, if there is a problem, then in the same manner that we would correct a problem, or I believe the phrase is cure, the problem with the violation of the open meeting law, we can cure the problem with this by passing the amendment and restricting the continued operation, the continued participation of the alternates.
And if you want my opinion on that,
I'm fine with
I'm
that.
not sure that we need to pass the amendment at this point. I don't think it really matters either way, because the law is the law, and the alternates participating in the deliberations are.
I would not
Not
necessarily argue with you on that, but we have bylaws that I think we
I
have to
understand.
change the bylaws.
I understand.
Yeah, I would
You
vote-
agree with?
First of all, I didn't express an opinion one way or the other. I just asked for an opinion, if you recall, from the county attorney. I did not say one way or the other whether I thought the alternate should or shouldn't.
I didn't say you had.
So I thought maybe that was what you were saying. I'm sorry if I misheard you. So, on this though, there's no need to act on this motion, in my opinion. Typically, if you have a statute, or court rules that some provision of that statute, of a multi-part statute, is, unlawful, unconstitutional, something to that effect, they don't go and amend the statute. It sits on the books. The case stands for what it stands for. Maybe in the next session, they may take it out of the code, but there's no need to do it. And so it stands for what it is, and the decision from the county attorney stands for what it is. There's no need to take an up or down vote on the motion. It's actually been mooted by the opinion of the county attorney, and I would suggest another reason, which is, in deference to your point, if we're to have comity and consensus among ourselves and harmony, I don't think it's good to put people in positions where they have to take positions like this about whether an alternate should participate. And that's one of the reasons I asked for the county attorney's opinion, is because personally, I don't want to vote one way or the other on this motion. I think it's divisive. And counterproductive to the goals of moving forward on what our mission here is, which is to objectively evaluate whether to recommend the change, and if so, what the change would be.
I accept what you're saying. I have been informed that we have to live by the bylaws, and that if the bylaws are incorrect, they need to be amended. Do I have any other comments either way?
I do. When did you get that little nugget that somehow our bylaws were not correct? Because in the 6 weeks that we had the basis for your amendment change, not once did you put out there that it was a legal issue.
Not once during that 6 weeks did I discuss the amendment.
That's not what I asked, Dave. I said, when did
Not
you find
once
out
during
about
that-
it?
Not once during that time did I discuss the amendment. The amendment, what I said is a legal issue is that the statute says no less than 5, no more than 9 members.
I understand that, but when you originally put it out, it was because you were trying to prevent our commission from devolving into chaos. So this whole legal issue, I'm asking, when did you find out about that, as this was a problem? Because it wasn't made known to us.
Before I submitted the amendment, I simply didn't bring it up at that time.
Don't you think that's a problem? So you
No.
lied then in your original
I did
basis for
not
why
lie,
you did the amendment?
Tamara. I did not lie, Tamara, and I have not been abusing.
They're totally different.
No,
Dave?
they're not.
devolving into chaos and a legal statute are completely different reasons for changing the bylaws.
I'm totally confused, and I apologize if
Dave asked if there were other comments, and following up on what Brian said, I was asking when, because it would have been nice if we had had time within that 6 weeks to maybe research this, find this out, not have a bomb dropped off on us last week and not having any clue, and then not being able to really process through all this information, and then not having Brian's official legal opinion go to the attorney. Only Dave's 4 questions went to the prosecuting
Right.
office.
But I thought originally.
I just see a lot of problems here.
I thought originally, 6 weeks ago, whenever the proposal was to clarify the role of the alternates going into the decision-making process. That's what I thought it was, and we did not check it on a legal perspective, okay?
It was not. It was devolving into chaos, was what his words were in his email to us. And not having the commission, the 3 members.
Okay, I don't remember that, Tamara.
I will happy to show
No,
it to you.
I know you keep everything.
Yes, I do.
Honestly, I just don't remember it. So I thought then what happened was, then we got the legal, based on last week's meeting, we got the legal. And then, so the 2 people who are experts think that it's not necessarily to do a bylaw change. What Dave is saying is, he's been instructed we should do a bylaw change to be consistent with what and I have no idea whether you need to do one or not. I guess, again, going to Brian's point of we need to move forward on this. So the question is, legal has provided a summary that Dave read out there. And I think that legal is telling us that the alternates should not be part of any kind of process that actually is a decision-making process. Again, I'm just paraphrasing. And deciding on how many commissioners we have or keep the same or whatever, that's a decision-making. So I think it's clear that the next phase would not include the alternates in it, at least the way I read it on that. So the question is then, do we just take the word of legal as I forgot the word you used, Brian, the rule of, and let our bylaws be the way it is, or just amend our bylaws to be consistent with the ruling that we receive from legal? That's really the issue on the table, I think.
Further comments? Let's call for a vote to amend the bylaws, and if anyone wants to abstain from the vote, they may feel free to do so.
This is to adopt the amendment that.
I would call the question on that,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, so it was tabled before, and now we're gonna
Right.
readdress it. Got it.
Are we going around?
Do we want to discuss it, or do we just want to go to a vote? Brian seemed to indicate that I don't think he felt it was fair to ask people to make comments about it. We can either discuss it, or we can go to a vote.
If. Okay.
Okay? Call for a vote?
Would you state it again, please?
The amendment, or what we're talking about?
What we're voting on?
We're voting on adopting
To approve the amendment.
to adopt the amendment.
And the amendment is, I just want to have it.
Alternates may participate in meeting discussions during the information gathering phase, but shall not participate in deliberations nor vote on agenda items until and unless appointed as a commission member. The statute says no less than 5, no more than, no less than 5, no more than 9. We have received an opinion from the county legal. The alternates should not be participating.
And-
Powered up, maybe I'm just speaking away from it.
I'm sorry.
So, I am not a lawyer, but I have been told by someone else, came up out of the audience last week, that we cannot move forward without modifying our bylaws. Now, that may not be true, but I just want to make sure we don't make a mistake here. So,
Now, can I just, one
Yes, Dave.
point of clarification too is, last week, according to the minutes that have been approved, Bob made a motion to adopt the bylaws, Article 9, Section 5, as you read, okay? But we did not have a second at that time, because we had another discussion. So I think if Bob is still the motion to adopt that, we need a second to do that before we vote.
Okay. Do we have a second? Phil has seconded. Call for a vote. Approve. We have 5 approvals.
And are the other people
Anyone want to
abstaining,
vote
or-
nay or all abstain? Let's just ask, nay,
Okay.
all abstain.
Tamara? Abstain? Okay. This should be, who's the fourth one? One.
Bryant, Brian,
Oh,
Kurt, and Tamara.
Thank you, okay.
Moving forward, opening discussion on the commissioners.
I would note, if you want to be pedantic about it, that taking action on the amendment was not on the agenda, and so that may have been out of order. If you want to get into details of procedural stuff, I think that was out of order. It isn't on the agenda.
Very well. We will consider that an advisory vote then. Moving forward, discussing the commissioners, administration versus legislation. The number of commissioners, open the floor. Bryant?
I'll pass for now.
Dave?
Can I ask what you mean by administration? Number is clear, but what do you mean by administration?
The job of the commissioners right now, under the statute, is a combination of administration and legislation. There are 2 optional forms of government that would remove the administrative function from the county commissioners and turn it over to another person. The executive commission form and the commission manager form. Starting out, the question is there a reason to remove the administrative function from the county commissioners?
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
I guess, does that mean if you remove the administrative functions, you are supporting a county manager? Thank you.
There are 2 forms, the executive commission and the commission manager form, that would do that,
Okay,
yes.
all right. Well, I believe, and I believe that having the 17 departments that currently report into the county commissioners be reporting into another individual. The hired county manager is probably something that makes sense. And the reason is that day-to-day operational, if anybody ever looks and goes through and spends time attending county commissioner meetings, at the diversity of the items that they deal with, and the lack of ability to spend the time necessary to go and really become more of an expert in a lot of these areas, I think it would be beneficial to have a county manager. Based on Kristen's information that she received from at least those that she looked at, that is something that is consistent with other models being done by other organizations, and to some degree makes sense to me. So if we're just talking about that little piece of it, obviously I want to hear what everybody else thinks about that, but I think that makes sense and would allow the commissioners to focus on things that have a greater impact on the county, like the planning and some of the other strategies that we maybe not have done before.
Bob?
And I take it that we're not getting into discussing the number of commissioners on this particular section of the discussion, is that correct?
We're open to both.
Both? Okay, well, first of all, speaking of the commissioners, I will be promoting to have more than 3 commissioners, either 5 or 7. And we can discuss that more later, but that's where I come down on that. As far as the administration, it's pretty much the same as Mr. Levine. I think it's important with having additional commissioners that we have an administrator that takes care of all of this administrative activity and given the authority to do that.
Brian?
You know, in the past, as a lawyer, I don't want to spoil things. So as a lawyer, I think people tend to listen to lawyers more than just your average person. I don't think that's right, and it's wrong for me to express my opinions before everyone else is gone.
Kurt?
In the course of the information gathering phase, whatever we want to call that part of our deliberations leading toward a recommendation, I didn't hear anything that was compelling about the brokenness of our current system that would be assuaged by either changing the form of government or the number of commissioners.
Phil?
I don't have a number of commissioners, I think, right now, but I think it's important we consider it. Now, my background, as most know, is in government, is education, everything. Doesn't make me better qualified or more knowledgeable. Just means that's what I bring to the table. We all bring something. And listening to the conversations over the past 5 months, 6 months. Now, I was really impressed by what we are doing with 3 commissioners and 6 elected officials. But I also think, is that the most responsive that the public can get? And that's what I've heard from the public repeatedly. Accountability. When they even mention of not electing one of those 6 row offices, the public was upset that they needed accountability. And I understand that. That's really, really important, that they feel like they're being heard. And if there is a place that our system is broken down at all, it's between the legislative and the executive branch. Because you have these 3 commissioners, or maybe 5, I don't know, whatever the number should be, who are there to look at the legislation, to know what's going on, to be in touch with the community. Then you have the executive branch, which are these, 17 departments and 6 row offices that we have, that are supposed to be executing the policy that is set by our elected officials. And how do we make that so everyone feels like they're voting for people who are hearing them, and the government, the execution, is being done in accordance with their wishes? And I think part of that would be looking at the separation between the legislative and the executive, the row office of the different departments. And how do we make that smoother? How do we make that more efficient and more more effective? We can always talk about saving money. If they do this, it will cost less. But is it more effective to get the job done? And I think we need to look at and seriously consider some type of manager. Now, it would be a regular hired manager who is hired and fired by the commission to appoint people, or would it be just one who is an administrator overseer? My inclination to go with some a little more authority who can actually interact with the different government officials. So for right now, my reactions from what I've heard from people sitting here, from people who came for interviews, from people who came forward from the commission, from the public rather, is that we ought to really consider looking at the number of commissioners. Is that adequate to do the job? According to the 200 of the 2020 census, we have about 170,000 people in Kootenai County. That means with 3 commissioners, 1 represents 56,000 people. If we had 5, it'd be 1 representing 36,000 people. And I think that matters, the area they're supposed to cover and how much they can actually communicate. Now, our commissioners are elected from, not elected by it, they run from a district. And if there were commissioners where, you know, if you walk to the grocery store as a commissioner, in the district where you actually live, people get to know you, and that contact also helps, more than sitting up there at some table, and, you know, every 4 years, all of a sudden, I get to look at a sheet and say, okay, I think I'll vote for this guy, I kind of know that name. Not the same as really knowing your commissioners and knowing what's coming back at you. And if they had someone to go to and say, okay, I need to make sure that, is it police, is it fire, is it planning and zoning, whatever, is the coordination between what we want as elected representatives of the public and what you are doing as an executive administrator running our government that the people are most impacted by. And with that, my initial reaction right now is we probably need some more commissioners. And I don't know if the number is 5 or 7, but I do think we need a manager who would have some authority over the departments, albeit authority only, not power. The power still rests with those elected commissioners, however many we decide upon. I'll stop there.
Tamara?
I'm more aligned with Kurt. I did not hear any compelling reason. I think there are some administrative issues that can be addressed, and I think many of those issues can be addressed internally. There's multiple options available to the county commissioners at their disposal right now that they can employ to mitigate a lot of these problems. Besides a chief operating officer, there's a county manager, which is different than the commission manager. And one of my concerns is the county manager and the commission manager, those two titles have been used interchangeably, and they're not the same. They have different statutory, well, one has statutory powers authorized, one is just a hire that would be a facility or an administrative, basically a glorified administrative assistant underneath the BOCC. They can actually put in any one of the currently elected officials and make them their administrative head. No change is required. And they can also delegate to other officials. There's a lot of options that they have right now that all came up through all the different places, all the different people talking, and none of them have been utilized. And I think it's a little bit irresponsible to recommend a change when there's many different opportunities available to them that can be done immediately that could vastly help with a lot of the administrative problems. I am for a 3-member board. If you listen to a lot of the elected officials that came in, there's a lot of problems with a 5-member board. One, the operating system can't even absorb any change. They can't input that. It is created to serve what we have now. 2, there's an infrastructure problem, a physical infrastructure problem. That's an issue. And if we have to change all that, that's going to come at a cost to the taxpayers. 3, well, I should say my third point instead of 3, is 5 members can easily sidestep. It was said multiple times, behind closed door meetings, hanging out, having discussions, you know, bouncing ideas off one another, whether inadvertently or purposefully, decisions could be made behind closed doors, which absolutely violates open meeting laws. And having an increase of members, whether it's 5 or 7, you're creating a structure that actually allows that to happen, and that is not in the public's best interest. And kind of to Phil's point about the commissioners and who they represent, I think one distinguishing factor is that our commissioners are elected at large, which means they are accountable and accessible to every single Kootenai County resident. It's not just their district. So as far as representation goes, I can call any one of the 3. I am not only, you know, allowed to contact or have any kind of words with the one in my district. All 3 of them have, you know, are accountable to me. I am their voter. So I don't think changing the number actually increases representation at all. They're already elected at large. So just following along with Kurt, maybe with a little bit more information of what I gleaned, no, I'm not off. I don't want to have any change to the number of county commissioners, and I do think we really need to make a distinction on the county manager versus commission manager. There's some benefits to a county manager, I totally get that, but if we're attributing the county manager kind of idea to the commission manager, there's a big distinction there, and we can't use one to justify the other.
To clarify, there is no commission manager. The commission manager is a form of county government.
Correct.
It consists of a commission of 3, 5, or 7 members and a county manager. The county manager that has been discussed that you were talking about just now is not a full county manager. It is a hire who is given a title.
Correct.
You can call call that person a secretary, you can call that person a county manager, you can call that person the emperor of the universe. It doesn't change the fact that that person does not have statutory authority.
That's what I stipulated
and is not
earlier.
a county manager.
I understand that, but unfortunately, throughout the 5 months we've been here, that is the type of terminology that has been used interchangeably. And what I'm saying is we need, as we go around, we need to make it very clear that we're talking either about an executive administrative assistant versus the optional commission manager form. Because many people are confusing the county manager with commission manager, and it's just become a very globulous type of entity. And I'm just wanting, because I couldn't understand with Dave which one it was, and I couldn't hear what the second point Bob had. So I'm not sure what he said. I just putting it out there that we are making sure we understand. We're talking about the optional form, because they can hire a county manager, an executive assistant, who does not have the statutory abilities as authorized in the Constitution. But they can hire somebody like that right now. The commission manager is what we're talking about, but separating the two terms, I think we need to use commission manager clearly and not just saying somebody to help out.
Kristen?
As most of you know, I did a fair amount of research. I reached out to other counties. I wanted to find out what they were doing and why. And I also listened to the folks who came in to talk to us. And so that I am as succinct as possible, I had created some comments when we were talking about going around the room. I'd like to read those, and maybe I can make my point a little clearer. Basically, in listening to the officials who came in front of us, only one county elected official implied that the budgeting process and financial management systems were adequate to meet the county's needs. That same county official stated that all was good just the way it was. All of the other former and current county officials stated that the budget processing and financial systems were cumbersome or inadequate to meet their department's needs. Most officials indicated that their current operating systems within their departments were antiquated and potentially close to failure. Yes, it might be expensive to replace it, but it can't be ignored. They're close to failure. Most stated that the budgeting process pitted them against each other. Some scoffed at the idea of being able to develop a strategic plan for their own departments when there was not a county-wide strategic planning process. And finally, many elected officials indicated that a county manager would be a welcome addition, especially in the areas of budgeting and financial systems. I also heard the elected row officers say, "My shop's good, don't look here. I just need more money, so go fix the commissioner's shop and all should be good." And I heard almost all of the former and current commissioners say, "We need quality professional help so that we can focus on policy and delegate the routine administrative tasks that we do not like or did not run for the office of commissioner to do or are not very good at." So, listening to the folks who came to us, you sometimes have to listen between the lines, and you've got to get a feel for what they're trying to tell us. I don't think they were trying to tell us that everything was good, and each of them in their own way probably had some suggestions. What we're looking at is a way to come up with a county government and process that might help all of them. So I do believe that having more than 3 county commissioners, I've kind of settled on 5 only because that's what I hear as most common out there, but I'm open to discussion of a different number. I believe we need a county manager because I think we need someone who has the authority to listen to what the county commissioners want and then implement it. That's part of our problem now. We've got lots of good ideas out there, but they don't get implemented. So my recommendation would be that we have a county manager, and I use that term county manager meaning one of the choices that is listed, and more than 3 commissioners. So I am recommending the commission manager form of government with more than 3 commissioners, yes. Thank you. I said that I prefer 5 at the moment, but I am open for discussion. I think that's what we're going to be doing going forward. It's my understanding that we're just kind of honing in a little bit on what our choices would be, and we will be discussing it in more detail later.
Yes, Dave?
I was wondering if I could just add, because I didn't talk about the number of commissioners. I thought we were just talking about the one piece of it. So I'd just like to make a comment about the number of county commissioners, if I could.
Go ahead.
Okay, and I did not think of the issue that Tamara talked about, which is system limitations on what could be done if you add more people. So I think that's something we have to really, would need to understand. And what my notes are pretty much that we've heard that one of the benefits of expanding to 5 county commissioners is it would allow to hold informal meetings or establish subcommittees. Truly, on my part, I would not think that that is the reason to be adding 5, go to 5 commissioners for that. While I understand the benefit of having subcommittees. But I do believe increasing the number of county commissioners to 5 is justified mainly to provide better direction and long-term direction. One reason the county does not have long-term planning, in my opinion, is due to the fact that the board makeup changes every 2 years. I was really surprised when Nancy Jones told us in 2010, 2014, 16, and 18, 2 of the 3 county commissioners changed. And with a change in the direction, or the board makeup, is a change in the direction of how the county's going to go. And you could look no further than the opt-out program. Building codes were in, building opt-out was in, opt-out was out, building codes are back in, building codes could be out again, depending on the makeup of the board. I think for a county to plan long-term, you need better consistency of the direction that the board can give. While 5 does not ensure that change won't happen, it makes change a little more, less likely maybe, and maybe a little slower. I do think also that we've talked a lot about cost. All of us have asked the questions of cost. We still don't know. We know what a county commissioner costs, okay, per person. But I would like us to think about cost maybe in a little different way, or the way I think about cost. I think of cost as a way of evaluating how much return on investment you actually get. In a business, it's called return on investment. So if we do spend an extra $1 for a county commissioner, or an extra $100,000 for county commissioners, whatever the number is, will we get as a county a bigger return on investment? If we plan better, will we save a lot of money? The sheriff gave us numerous examples of where he believed that lack of planning and lack of technology upgrades have cost the county millions of dollars. Well, would we have had better planning, and would we implemented that planning if we had more time for the county commissioners to actually focus on that? I don't know. But when we do talk about cost, I think we should also explain to ourselves and ultimately, if we decide to go to 5 commissioners, to the public, why we think that this cost is justified and what is our return on investment and what are we looking for it to do. I also do believe that the commission manager, or whatever the right title is that Tamara was talking about, which is what I was thinking, and I appreciate the clarity there, Tamara, it's real important that we all understand and recommend how we see that job working. We heard that over and over again. What is the role of that job? And I think that we really need to have that discussion about how we see it working. Is it coordinating technology upgrades across the whole county? Is it doing the budget? Is it trying to build a collaborative approach of all the elected officials and the county commissioners? That is the thing that if we go out and if we recommend that, it would be helpful to tell the public why we think this is a good idea. And the last thing I will say is just a general concern. everything I've ever done when it comes to projects or organizational changes have always had unintended consequences. And I think it's impossible to eliminate those. But I think when I look at the way I'm going to consider changes that I would like to recommend is, if it doesn't work perfectly, what is the downside? Because we can't change this. If we were a company and we made a mistake, we would just go about changing it back. But we can't do that. So I think I personally am an incremental change person, not a gigantic change because of that. So I'm going to be looking and asking you questions to help me understand what are we not thinking about as we go through this. Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to kind of step out of the chair at this point and address the subject. The question comes up, is the account system broken? We have heard from a number of people who have come before us that we don't do planning. We have just had an election in which a major question was growth. How are we going to manage growth? You know, we have not had any issues discussed on how this county is going to manage growth. We don't do any strategic planning. We haven't been dealing with things. As Dave mentioned, Bob Norris came in here and gave us a laundry list of problems that have occurred because we don't plan. We don't plan because, if you'll pardon me, Leslie Duncan came in here and told us how much she loves her job. She loves the administrative function. She has no time for planning. There's so much time spent on administration by all three commissioners that they don't have time to plan. If we want this county to move forward, if we want the county commissioners to address things like growth, to do planning, strategic planning, then they need to have the time to do it. And the way we give them the time to do it is to take the administrative effort off their backs. 70–80% of the time they spend in these offices is on administrative effort. If we take that time and take it and give it to an administrator, to a county manager, commission manager, form of government, then we have the possibility of the county commissioners actually taking care of this county, planning for it. We've got a mess right now on Highway 95 because nobody bothered to figure what we were going to do with all the extra cars. We're trying to put in the Hutter interchange, and yet we're behind the 8 ball on that. By the time we get the Hutter interchange in, we've already got a problem, and it'll be worse before we get that in. So what we need is we need to take that administrative effort, and I'm sorry, it is broken right now. We need to take that administrative effort off of the county commissioners so that they can plan, so that they can produce policy. With that, Brian?
Thank you. With regard to the last comments just made by Dave here, one of the concerns I have with, and I'll use the manager and executive form sort of interchangeably, the commission manager and commission executive, because they pretty much remove all of the administrative function from the BOCC and transfer to their realm. One of the issues that I have with that, is that what happens after our Board of Commissioners is freed up to do this planning? Planning is something that you do for the future. The future arrives. Do you have to continue planning? What is our Board of Commissioners going to do after the planning is done? It seems to me they'd be out of a job if that's all they do. I don't know why what the Board of Commissioners is doing right now. I don't know why that can't be streamlined to some extent. We've heard some things that are available to them to take some of that administrative load off of them. There's technology that can be used. Mr. Taggart, when he spoke here, and I thought he was a very credible, moderate guy, he said that the job that he had, which was not one of these forms, which is by the way, one of these forms is a permanent change, essentially. Mr. Taggart said that his function worked very well. He was the hired manager, or as Dave would call him, secretary. What he did was took a lot of the load off of them, and I don't know why we wouldn't try that first. As Dave was just talking about incrementalism, I don't know why we wouldn't try doing something like that first, since it worked the first time, and allow the Board of Commissioners to invest their time in other directions at this point. And then if they need to keep, I'll call it the Taggart position, keep someone in the Taggart position, allow that. But to go right into making a change where we take all of this, as I think you just said, it was 70% of their time is spent on administrative functions. Well, after they're freed up to do their planning, and the planning is done, because once you institute the plan, you don't have any more planning to do. What are they going to do? Then we've got this new system where that we don't need a Board of Commissioners, essentially. So I don't know that it's a good idea to go to a permanent change without trying an incremental change first. So my thought is, and we don't have the ability to recommend this, but I think that the board should do that first before we recommend changing to a permanent change, removing so much power from the board and giving it to either someone who's appointed by the board, thus removing more authority from the people, or having that person elected. But again, you've changed the entire power structure of what we're looking at in our current form, from our current form. That's one of my thoughts. One of my other thoughts, piggybacking off of Dave's comment here, when Brent Regan was here, someone asked him about the county manager, and I'm using that term, the commission manager is what I believe the question was. And he said, well, you know, that's ripe for corruption. I didn't think much of that at that time. And lo and behold, I mean, I didn't do much research, maybe 5-10 minutes at most, on our last presentation on the multiple counties around the country. Brunswick County in Newton, North Carolina, has a county manager as we would a commission manager. And 2 years ago, the county manager, the commission manager, and the assistant were both convicted in federal court of corruption. One or both of them went to prison, federal prison. So, you know, we have this law of unintended consequences. We don't know what could come of this. There's obviously a lot of things that could come. I think the smartest thing to do is to invest in someone like Mr. Taggart before we make any wholesale changes. With regards to, oh, and by the way, the problems that we're talking about with the computer system, and I think early on we talked about the phone system, all of those can be remedied through just some leadership. All we need is some commissioner to take the bull by the horns and just get some leadership going. As Leslie Duncan was saying, build up some relationship with your quote unquote row officials, and I think that would take care of that problem. That's a pretty easy one to solve. With regard to growth, I think the board could, if they wanted to spend that time on that, they could do that themselves after getting a Taggart type person, or they could form a commission just like this one to study the growth issues. With regard to the number of commissioners, I don't believe we need to change there. I don't think things are so broken that any change to another form is at this time advisable. Mr. Felios felt very strongly that 5 full-time commissioners would just bog down the system. We don't have the ability to recommend part-time or full-time. But Mr. Felios, who's, I think, obviously one of the driving forces here, didn't believe that 5 full-time was a good idea. He thought it was a very bad idea. He said it would bog the system down, and I think it probably would. With regard to the idea of more commissioners giving us greater representation, it wouldn't. We are 100% represented now. You can put, as one of our citizens said, you could have 186,000 representatives. We're still 100% represented. Each commissioner represents 33% of the people. If you have 5 part-time, well, if you have 5 commissioners, they each represent 20% of the people. So if you want to talk to some commissioner, you talk to one, when we have 3, you're talking to 33% of them. You talk to 1 when we have 5, you're talking to 20% of them. If those people are part-time, and I suppose that would be decided by them, we don't have the ability to recommend that. But if they're part-time, you're really talking to a much smaller percentage. You're talking to 10%. And they're not as fully invested in their jobs. So for all of those reasons, I don't think we have we've exhausted the remedies that we could take without a permanent change. Thank you.
Dave?
I don't have anything else.
Bob, anything else to add?
Could you make more comments about Filio saying that the system would, I don't remember that. That 5, what did he recommend if he didn't recommend 5?
Yeah, I went over that again because I wanted to make sure that my notes were correct. So I went through and listened to the YouTube video of it. And he said, he had a real scheme laid out. And I don't want to go through the whole thing, but as he was being questioned, he thought we needed 5 part-time commissioners. And he was specifically asked, what about full-time? And he said, and I think I have the quote somewhere. He said, full-time will slow down the process, I believe. And I think he even was more adamant at that. And I can't remember because he was really adamant about 2 things. And both of them were, he had a scheme, like I said, 5 part-time commissioners, a commission manager, and I can't remember what the third was. I have it in my notes here. But anyway, I did confirm that he said 5 full-time would bog the system down.
Yeah, well, he still recommended 5. He just.
But he said they had to be part-time. He said if they're not part-time, and this is a quote, forget it.
We don't
Forget
have
it.
much, I don't
That's
have,
what he said.
we don't have much to say about whether they're part-time or full-time or how much they get paid, as a matter of fact. We can just make the recommendations on the numbers and so forth. One of the things I felt very important for having an improvement in our governance is the strategic planning, which several of us have mentioned. And one of the main reasons we can't have strategic planning is because at any one election, the whole game plan can change. And one of the big problems that we're having here as a group is that a number of us want to keep 3 rather than something more than that. And because with only 3 members, it's easier to keep control. I really think 4 or more, or 5 or more, has been mentioned before. Most people think in terms of 5. It takes more planning, it takes more talking, it takes more thinking on the part of the electorate when anything happens with 5 members. And right now, if you decided that you wanted a new computer system and all 3 guys really went for it and they were dead set to get it done, the next election somebody can change their mind. And that happens fairly frequently, I understand. I think at this point in time, we know where the battle lines are drawn. We have 3 people, I think, that basically don't want any change at all in our county government. You can talk about the manager form that is more like Dave said, is a secretary, which the board can do anytime they wish to. That's not really a change as far as we're concerned. We have 3 people, if I understand it correctly, that really don't want any change at all, and maybe 4. I think that in a growing community like this, and having the ability to make good strategic planning, not only in growth, but many other areas such as computers, which we are spending millions of dollars a year, probably not a year, but a huge amount of money because we have archaic equipment. and we haven't been able to get a plan that stays in place. And this has a lot to do with that. So I continue to really feel strongly that we should have at least 5 members of the commission and have a manager that is the optional form of manager as a recommendation.
I've watched every one of the YouTube videos from every one of the sessions that we've had, these therapy sessions that we've enjoyed together. I'll speak up so you can hear Bob. So, yeah, I've reviewed all these YouTube videos. I was way ahead of even your little subcommittee in studying all the different forms and all the different states. In fact, I kind of noted that, and I spent a lot of time on my own, many hours, looking and researching other governments. But they're not here. And I've worked in government for my entire career. Not always in the government, but sometimes out where lots of my time, the last 20 some odd years, where I've had to interact with governments every day. Local, state, federal, lots of federal, and litigated over many issues involving governments. That's what I do all day. I just work in and around governments trying to get things done. Governments in California, governments in New Mexico, governments in Oklahoma, Missouri, Kansas, New York. I have a lot of experience with governments. And years ago, I used to think the federal government was a solution to everything. I've come to a different conclusion. And I've thought about local government a lot, say the last 10 years. And I think about what's before us and the choice to make, and I think about this county, and what's going on here is we're becoming more like a city, urbanized and suburban area, and the rural areas are being gobbled up and built on. And we don't like it. There's the traffic that you mentioned. There's, boy, we need a new computer system to handle all this. And I think about all those things over a collective lifetime and career. And I think about these options. And I think about things like what Dave said about unintended consequences. And I think about what Bryant said about, you know, incremental change might not be a bad idea. We might not be able to recommend hire your own kind of project manager or just manager outside these options. Just use your existing power. And I tend to favor that. I think that there is a reason why people need to continue to elect all of their row officials and have direct accountability from them. I would grant you that even if, and I don't know that any are, I'm just saying, even if they were the biggest bozos in the world, they still have competent deputies. From what I've seen, the people we have as elected officials and their deputies are competent people. And nobody has come in and told me of it, maybe, but perhaps one example of somebody where there was alleged fraud involved, where there was, you know, boy, he wasn't on top of it as an elected official. But we seem to still be alive as a county. And that person's no longer an elected official, so I think that bears out our elected process. You know, I've heard concerns about, you know, the 3-commissioner format really, you know, that favors Republicans up here. If you look at the history of commissioners in this county, and when I first moved here, I had to litigate a case where I had to study this state's history from its inception, backwards and forwards for litigation, and know it cold. And I studied this commission's history throughout Idaho's history. We've had long stretches of Democrats when there actually was mining and timber around here, right? long stretches where labor actually was quite strong and controlled county government. And we've had more recent stretches where the Republicans control it. And so, one seizing power versus another, it comes and goes. 5 commissioners isn't going to solve that issue. 7 commissioners isn't going to solve that issue. You got 3 commissioners, they're busy, and I think it's just the right mix. And, idle fingers are the work of the devil. Giving commissioners too much time, I think, is not well advised. It's going to cost more to have more commissioners. I don't want part-time commissioners. They can be part-time now, I guess, show up or not show up. I hear there's some of that going on. But I just think, you do the job. You do the job, you make it work. I get up every day, I work for my clients, and, work late into the night. And I think that's what you bring to your job. And I think about this county and where it's going, and do we really need some commission manager optional form? I don't see it. Bryant touched on something I would have raised out of North Carolina, the potential for corruption. And that administrative power, and I reflect on a comment I heard from one of the commissioners about, we passed the wake ordinance and the sheriff just won't enforce it. And, we need that kind of power. It was described that way. Where does that power stop? I worry about that kind of maintaining a balance that I think we currently have, and maybe things don't work well. Maybe they work fair enough. But I do worry about an imbalance among powers. I would rather have people tense about their respective power spheres. It is that, checks and balances, if you will. I've, in particular, over the last year, I guess we're going on 2 years here, I've seen examples of government officials using their powers and locally, statewide, nationwide, that really concerns me about overreach. And as a lawyer, I know that in the administrative channels of the law, the administrative state, as a citizen trying to challenge government overreach, you're in for a long haul and a long cost, and the average person in America can't afford it. And so when I think about empowering a commission manager to take on the administrative responsibilities, which sounds like really like, okay, there's a lot of stuff there, right? But what could go wrong? Okay, and I know we're not in the federal agency sphere, we're not even in the state agency sphere, but these counties, these row officials, they have statutory responsibilities that they carry out. And the notion of having a manager and then putting folks from row positions under them, no longer elected, that worries me a lot about the kind of power dynamics that go on there. The sheriff mentioned it, and he beat me to it. But what happens when they're burning your town down and the sheriff shows up and says, manager, I think I should go down there and maybe stop them from looting the stores and burning the place down. And the commissioner manager says, talk to the insurance adjuster, and he said, if someone gets shot, that's gonna be bad, really costly, don't do that. And he said, on the side of the car, it says to protect and serve, so I think maybe I'll go there. And he says, you're fired, right? I know that's just like a really out there possibility, like that could never happen, right? Never happen in him, right? And we have no recent examples of that, none. The last year has taught me to think twice about handing off power to administrative branches, whether they be federal, local, or state. So, diffusing power among more commissioners, I think, just doesn't help. I think, it's a full-time job. You run for the job. You might not know it before you get elected. You darn well should, and if you basically get the seat and it's more than you expected, maybe you should just work harder, or maybe you should just not have the position. But you basically are in the kitchen, so make the meal. Eliminating the row officials, I just do not believe that's a good idea. There's accountability there, and as I said, I've heard this, well, what if we have unqualified people, we might get an unqualified people, we might have an unlucky draw sometime. I didn't hear, but this one minor example, not minor maybe in terms of dollar value, but the problem got solved eventually. Everybody goes through it. I don't see why you get rid of your row elected officials and put them under a manager. There's just too much mischief to be had there. So I think you're getting the gist where I'm headed. I approached this, and I started down the road of this commission truly, when Commissioner Brooks, I approached him and asked him to appoint me. He never knew me, and I never knew him. And I told him candidly, I'll be objective, and I'll weigh this thing, and I'll look at it, and I'll do my homework. And I have. But I apply kind of a legal framework to it, which is you got to convince me beyond 50%, let's say, that change is needed. And I've listened carefully to everybody who's been here and spoken with us, commissioners, elected row officials, their deputies and staff, former and present. I've listened carefully. I've listened to those videos again. I have done my research on county forms of government. I have called other counties. I have my, at this point, 30 years worth of experience dealing with nothing but governments. And I just cannot say that I would recommend a form of government change at this time. Furthermore, I think it's a really poor judgment to recommend that at this time. I think as a nation, we have gone through almost 2 years now of tumult that is just so anxiety-provoking for Americans. And the one thing that we have that's constant in our lives is we know that our local government, our doors in our homes, we kind of feel safe in that, right? And we start to spring out of this pandemic and go to something more endemic, having lived through masks and being anxious about whether we're going to be told to wear a mask, forced to wear a mask, forced to take a vaccination, and all the poor examples of how government can overreach into people's lives and make them anxious. And we come off the back of that into a study commission, which I think was a good idea to do, don't get me wrong. But I think it's a poor timed idea to recommend changes. I think for a community already suffering essentially COVID PTSD, I just don't think it's a wise thing to put it forward. You're almost asking to have it voted down. I'm not saying maybe people wouldn't embrace it, whatever is put forward, but I do think, have some compassion for the people that live here. I've lived here since 1997. I think I might be the longest living person, not longest living, but the longest person. I'm sorry, Sherry, but you were in Alaska all those years. So. But, I've been here since 97. There's the outlaw Josie Wales, where Josie Wales goes, watch him, Jed. I've seen him do some things, right? And I've been here a long time, and I've seen a lot of things, including in this county government. And I just think, yeah, there have been times when I thought, wow, there's some real bozos running this place. And shame on me for not stepping up and being more involved. But this past year convinced me, I think like everybody in this crowd and everybody listening, that if we're gonna have a democracy, a Republican form of government, local, state, or federal, you need to step up yourself as a citizen and go to those meetings, even though it stinks to have to go and listen to us. And I think there's a revived feeling of a renewed spirit toward watch government, be involved in your government, that has kind of, in recent years, people just thought everything was on autopilot. I'm willing to give this form of government a bit more time, and the people, I think, a break from their anxieties about could their local government be the same, please? I think I'm willing to give them a break, even if, Dave, it means that maybe the lines at the lights are a little longer. Maybe we don't have the best strategic plan. There's some planning out there. I think you get away with hiring a manager. You don't need to go change the government. You don't need to go add more commissioners. We're not that big yet. We're big. We're getting bigger. Don't like it. But I think we can live the way we are for a while longer till the dust settles. and people are ready to come back to, if necessary, a study commission and more calmly approach this. Another thing is, I don't think that we have studied this enough. Any one of us in here. Now, I know, Kristen, I'll give you great deference because you spent thousands of hours on this. But and that's a credit to you. I'm just giving you accolades here. But I know you've spent all these hours on it, and it's to be commended. But I don't think that we, as a collective commission, have ripped into the guts in this enough to really understand the operations in this government to the point that we can make an informed decision. I was told by one of the people that was in here, everybody heard it, you know, if you could only see what happened in executive sessions, then you'd know that we needed a change in government. Well, I don't have privy to that. I have privy to what people told me when they came here, what I studied, and 30 years of litigating with governments. In my view, I don't recommend a change. So thank you for your patience. I know this was supposed to be a short soliloquy, but it turned into a long one.
I guess I would say that in terms of, Dave, your questions of is the system broken, is anyone planning for growth? People have pointed out the question about inadequate strategic planning, poor planning for technology. Those are all problems. I just don't see that a change in the form of government is going to fix it. Even if we went to a mandated commission manager form of government, that manager still serves at the pleasure of the commission, and the commission can kick him out. They kicked Taggart out at one point when they decided they didn't like what he was recommending. If we move to force their hand to require them to have a manager, they could still kick the person out. It's just they'd have to hire someone different. There's nothing that guarantees continuity, which is what I heard people asserting throughout the information collection phase, because they can fire at will, whoever is in that position. Now, if we force their hand, or the voters force their hand by going to a change of form, it's just that they have to fill the position again, instead of leaving it vacant like they did with Taggart. And honestly, I thought your phrasing, Dave, was interesting, of saying we need to take the administrative load off the commission. I much prefer Bryant's position that taking action to address their workload ought to be their job, not ours. It's not the study commission's job to fix the commissioner's problems. And if they haven't explored and undertaken work to try to streamline things themselves, I don't see that it's our job to do that for them. And it's certainly out of scope as well. So I don't see that that's our responsibility, nor should we. And I, again, don't think that we should move to a manager form, a forced manager. I think it's an abdication of their responsibility if they think we should do it and the voters should take that off of their responsibility. They can hire a glorified secretary, chief operating officer, whatever, to help with the load of the 17 departments. Not a problem. They just need to find the budget for it and find an appropriately qualified person. It doesn't require a change in the form of government to do that. And it would take a lot of their administrative load off of them.
Hey, wait, Dave, it is after 7, take a break.
I'm sorry, I didn't even notice the time. Take a 10-minute break.
saying that, I feel privileged to be part of this group. And I know we disagree on a number of things, and there'll probably be some heavy disagreements before we're through. But when I was asked to do this, I said I would. Despite my background, I said I'm going to start with a blank slate. I'm going to look at this government and see if I see things that make it better for the people, not better for the people who sit up there. And that's where we are, in my opinion. Now, I do not see what we're doing as a political process. Politicians get elected and serve, but how government functions is not political in itself. It should be structured so it addresses the needs of the people. Now, I've heard repeatedly tonight, throughout the entire process, not just tonight, about the fear of all these dishonest people. I was in government for 40 years or longer, both privately, in government, working for government, as an elected official. None of it here in Idaho, and I never once got indicted, which may have been lucky. But in that entire time, I always thought there were a lot of really good people here. They do their job. They show up 8 to 5. Now, are there some lazy people? Of course there are. There are in every job, no matter what, any place you go. There's probably some crooks, too, really bad people. I encountered a few of them in my time. I wasn't one of them. I didn't encourage them. And if I saw something going wrong, I reported it. And that's what we do if someone is acting improperly. We even heard concern about that from one of our row officers here. They're telling people not to sign off on this check or do that. Well, if someone told me that, I would immediately go to the sheriff. I wouldn't worry about whether I'm doing something wrong. I'm not going to be doing anything wrong. I think we need to trust people to a certain extent, and I feel a lot of this is lost. We just don't trust even the people they elect, never mind the ones who work in government. We consider them all lazy, not doing much of anything. Well, one of the row officers was here, and they reported they were like $1.5 million in need for a computer program. That's not something that just happened. That wasn't, well, oh gosh, we kind of missed that. It was a mistake. That took years to accumulate that. If you needed an updated computer program, and we know that what we have today will probably be obsolete 2 years from now, then you better be planning accordingly. And I think it was Brian who said, strategic planning is really just not there. And strategic planning is just more than sitting at a desk and deciding what to do. And I don't expect the commissioners to do that. I expect the department heads to put together what they need over the course of the year, over 5 years. And then those people up there decide how that will be allocated, how that will be funded, who it will serve. And based on that and the time I've spent in government, I really believe as a minimum, knowing that government is growing, that we probably need 5 commissioners. Now, I personally prefer 7. There's a reason for that, which I will discuss later on if we ever get that far. But I believe 5 commissioners is the minimum we need to really have a functioning government. That means for anything to pass, you need 3 of those commissioners. Any given election, you elect one different person, and all of a sudden the majority has changed. And it balances out a bit. So you got to at least have 3 who agree with you to get anything done. And I think that's really important for accountability, not just to the public, but to the actual government itself and how we're supposed to work. And I believe a real manager is essential. Now, the problem with the manager, even when appointed by the commission, is that what authority does that person have? You have 6 elected officials. They run the police, the sheriff, the clerk's office, and the coroner, the rest of them. They really have no accountability to that manager. They can tell the manager, I don't care what you want. I got elected, I'm here, and I'm going to do it the way I wanted to do it. Now, there is a certain amount of control, that is the budget. But really, are the 3 county commissioners going to tell the sheriff he can't have his budget? I don't think so. I just think we really need to understand the difference between power and authority, and who has the authority to act, and who has the power to get things done. And power comes from elected officials. And to me, it comes from actually elected county commissioners. If you look at counties all across the country, which Kristen did over a period of 3 or 4 months, something like 90% of the counties only, actually have a manager or commission form of government like we have here. Some have 3 commissions, some have 5, but basically it's the same structure. A certain number of row officers, type officials elected, some that are appointed, and some have a manager of different controls, different leverage, if you will. To me, we need a manager who has some say-so over at least some of our row offices and all the departments that can actually sit down and say, look, we've got $1 million here. How do we divide that pie? It isn't because you got elected, you get to demand half of it. We got to divide it between 6, 8, 10, how many people there are. And that could all be done with a qualified county manager who knows what he's doing, an administrator who has that background and that experience. So I was saying, counties across the country, about over 90% operate on a commission form of government. But almost 90% of cities, over 90% of cities, operate on a council manager form of government. Now, the reason for that probably has a lot to do with services. Cities provide a lot more service, all your parks and police and fire. Every city has those services. The county does to some extent. Now, the problem we have in Kootenai County is it is growing, and the services we need to provide are very different from 6 row officers and 3 commissioners of 50 years ago. We are like a city now, whether people want to admit it or not. It may have its rural area, but this is a very cosmopolitan area. Kootenai County itself, where there's different cities, or the unincorporated area. If you want to know about a council manager form of government, 10 blocks from here is the city of Coeur d'Alene. They've had it for quite a few years. I don't know of anyone being indicted or going to jail over there. They do a job. They get it done. They coordinate with the activities that the county can actually have main control over. Your property taxes and how that's assessed, not the assessment of it. That's done by the cities. And I just really believe we need a manager who has authority that can run what is a growing place and much more on the grounds of a city, not a rural developing county. And we need a plan not for the government we have today, but what is the government we need for 5 years from now? And if we see Kootenai County growing the way it has over the past 10 years, then I think the population growth, the needs of the community, and most services, whether people care to admit it or not, that government institutes are in response to demands from the public. In this case, the growing population. We didn't have suburbs 30, 40 years ago. Now you have a suburban influence demanding certain needs, more parks, more recreation. And those types of demands need to be recognized and addressed by an adequate government, which means, in my opinion, as a minimum, 5 commissioners and an authoritative county manager.
I want to go back to what Kurt said before. I wanted to piggyback on the continuity issue. If you look at, what was it, Virginia with the election, they never have with their governor. I think there's twice in their entire history, state history, they've only had 2 governors who had back-to-back terms. It changes over. That's a part of politics. That's not something to be afraid of. And creating a position on the hope that somebody will want to stay here and fix all those administrative issues with the creation of a commission manager position is a problem, because people move. I mean, David Childs, our guest, who's devoted his life to stuff, he on average, he was only in a place every 5 to 6 years. And this was his passion. So if we're creating a position for somebody, thinking that they'll be able to smooth through the lines and create a better continuity through the difference in elections if people get out or in or whatever, or decide not even run again, it's kind of a false hope. There's no guarantee with that. And I think creating a whole new county structure on a hope without even trying to implement what both they said and I said earlier, all these other options that are currently at their disposal is irresponsible. It's irresponsible for us to recommend it. It's irresponsible for them to do it. Besides the fact that currently they can appoint one of any currently elected official to be this commission manager. It wouldn't even be hiring somebody else. Besides creating or having one of the county commissioners also become their administrative head. There's options. and to gloss over them and not discuss them and go straight to this monumental change of creating a bigger bureaucracy in our local government is a problem. To Dave Levine's point, there will be ramifications. Creating this position creates a bureaucracy. This person would not be accountable to the people at all. And if I remember correctly, none of the other 6 elected officials wanted the commission manager position. They wanted somebody to help the Board of County Commissioners. They did not want anybody over them at all. They want to have direct line. They are peers. They are not going to be below anybody else, especially a hired position. And to your point, Phil, yes, the county is growing and it's been growing, but we have the same Federalist Republic system that we've had for 245 years. And when it was put in its inception, it was definitely not at the population that we are today. And I don't see that growth is any kind of viable reason to completely change our structure when nothing else is being done prior to that to fix these problems. And I think it was Bob that asked, or Bryant couldn't remember, the 3 points that Chris Filios wanted was the 5 part-time. He wanted the commission manager, and he wanted all the other positions to become appointed. He did not want them to stay elected. That's later on in our agenda. I don't see how creating another bureaucratic position at the expense of the taxpayers when nothing else is being explored internally is prudent. I think that that's jumping to a problem. And when it comes down to it, I think part of the issues are from the Board of Commissioners side, they want more control. They want to be able to tell people what to do. From the elected official sides, they want less micromanagement. They just want to do what they want to do. Well, that's a personality problem. That does not justify a change in structure. So I don't think having the commission manager helps in any way, and the clerk and the assessor both stated that it would actually increase the problems. It would slow down the process. It would increase problems. I think let's listen to these people. This is not the position that they're asking for. If they want a hired assistant, a COO, change the organization, fine. But jumping to something like this and recommending that, I don't think it's appropriate. It's wrong. It would be detrimental to our county.
I wanted to apologize to the commission and to Kurt and Tamara specifically. You made me question my own knowledge. So I contacted Nancy, the goddess of all open meeting law. And you can add a discussion item to the agenda. You may not add an action item to the agenda without an emergency. So I apologize that I gave you guys incorrect information, but I'm glad you've moved past that. But you were absolutely right in the bylaw vote was not on the agenda, so that did have to come off. So I just wanted to clarify all of that and specifically apologize. So thank you, Nancy.
Crooks come in all forms. They could be elected, they can be hired. Yes, I was aware, Brian, you know, we can sit here and come up with specific examples of anything. Yes, Buncombe County had an issue. They had, their county manager and son were indicted, okay? That person was fired and replaced. LA County Sheriff is currently serving time in Texas. Nancy Jones told us that our own county had an embezzlement issue several years back. In South Dakota, the county treasurer was indicted. In Minnehaha County, and again, I didn't Google these specifically. These are look for these specifically, but in talking to the people, when I was talking to county managers, they were very open about these things. I could have given you folks like 3 days worth of information. You know, I collapsed it down into just little snippets. So when I talked to the county manager for Minnehaha County, she said, oh yeah, we had an issue with our prosecuting attorney. Google it, it was out there. You know, and I didn't Google it because that's not the point. The point is, you can find corruption or problems on any side. So I think we can all swap stories in that regard, but I really don't want to make a decision based on what if an individual might do something. You know, we wouldn't function very well as a society if we were worried about that. Second point, we're talking about the 3 commissioners or 5 commissioners. What I can tell you is that every county that I surveyed that had more than 5, these commissioners are paid a minimal amount. Some have benefits, some don't. So when we talk about, well, if you take 80% of the function of a commissioner away, what will they do? They technically become, I'm putting it in air quotes, part-time, but if you'll note, none of our current positions, none of our elected officials are full-time. There's nothing that says in there, you will work full-time, you will work 40 hours a week, you will take a break from 12 till 1, yada, yada, yada. So what happens is when an individual, if you've got 5 county commissioners and they're paid $1,000 a month or $1,200 a month, they adjust and they delegate, and the work gets done. You've just got 5 minds looking at it, or 7 minds looking at it with their collective experience rather than 3. Also, the county manager form is separate from a discussion of the row officials. So none of the county managers I talked to had anything to do with any of the elected officials' operations. So when we talk about departments, it's the Board of County Commissioners departments that the county manager is involved in. They are not directly involved in any of the work that has to do with any of the other row officials. So the sheriff still has his shop, and the assessor has his or her shop, and the treasurer, et cetera, et cetera. Where it comes together and where it seems to be helpful to have a county manager who has budget authority to pull everything together is that they aren't competing with each other, because there's someone else looking at it, taking it to the county commissioners. That county manager doesn't make the decisions. That county manager pulls together the information and takes it to the county commissioners. So it's a little less partisan in terms of, here's what I want, and what I want is going to compete with what you want. Okay, people have mentioned strategic planning. People have, I mentioned the whole business continuity issue, where this county had a lot of difficulty during COVID, and some counties didn't, because they had a plan in place and they figured out how to do it. I know that we've heard from those who have spoken to us and from around the room here that there's the thought that the county manager, it would be a slower process. Actually, it's not. You define the Board of County Commissioners define what the area of authority or responsibility is of the county manager, and that person does that. So oftentimes people can go directly, and I'm talking row officials or their deputies or people in their staff can go directly to the county manager because it's an administrative type issue and it can be resolved. They don't have to go to the county commissioner. Now, the county commissioner ultimately, the county commissioners ultimately hire and fire the county manager. So if they don't like the way that individual is using the authority, yes, they can be fired. And yes, I guess if you hire badly, you could have a revolving door. As Dave Child said when he came here, for a county like ours, for the first time, if you're having a county manager, you want to be really thorough. You want to get input from the row officials. You want to get input from the county commissioners. You'd have HR. You'd have people weighing in on who the person should be, because that first hire is really important. You want to launch it and get it off well. It's very common for the county manager to be hired with input from the row officials. So this is not someone who's just there to take a certain amount of work off the county commissioners. It's someone there to try to pull the whole thing together because they bring a professional skill set and they bring knowledge and experience about systems, about operations that can help everyone. I heard from county managers saying that when a new system was introduced, this is at Summit County, Utah. At first, they thought, the raw officers thought, we don't want to have anything to do with this person. But then a couple of them would go to meetings and they'd find out, hey, this person could be really helpful. They've got some insights to help us with our operations. So again, I think the whole idea of a county manager does not bring more bureaucracy. I think it helps break through the bureaucracy because you've got someone who knows how to manage a large organization and how to be there for people who have questions and resolve some of the problems before they become big problems. So I also want to thank Brian for actually having done a lot of research. You said you did a lot of reading too. What I wish though is that you had shared it with us. I think I put myself like out on a limb because I did this work and I worked with Bob and with Phil, and I kind of put myself out there saying, here's another form, and I kind of like it, but here it is for you to consider. And I would have liked, because I think you've done a lot of that too. It seems like in some ways you came to some different conclusions. Well, that would have been nice to have had in a presentation that everybody could have heard, rather than have somebody kind of snipe afterwards, like, well, here's what I learned about Buncombe County, and well, here's what I learned about, rather than sniping at each other, we could have said, we could have talked about it in an open forum, and that would have been appreciated. But I do thank you, because you also gave us a lead on a book that we utilized too, so it's appreciated. But all of us could have done that. We all could have come together and had it as part of an information session. And that's where I think it's a little unfortunate. We're where we are now, but I think we missed an opportunity to work better together and share information.
I'd like to make a couple of comments. There's been some misunderstanding. There's been some misunderstanding, some conflation of issues, and I'd like to discuss some of this and clarify some of the issues that we're discussing here tonight. It has come up that if we have a county manager, they will be in charge of the row officials, appointed row officials. That's a completely separate issue. If we go to the commission manager form of government, we have to discuss all 6 of the row officials, should they be elected or appointed. We also have to discuss 2 of those officials, should their positions be broken up because they have multiple responsibilities. We have to discuss 2 of the other officials, should their positions be combined with someone else's. These are all issues that we discuss, whether it is a commission manager, an executive commission, a 3-member, 5-member, or 7-member commission. All of those issues with the row officials are completely separate. There is no issue with a commission manager that the manager is in charge of the row officials, unless those row officials are no longer elected, which is a completely separate discussion. And as a matter of fact, hopefully we will get to it before midnight tonight, but 2 of those row officials are on the docket for tonight's discussion, and the other 4 are on the docket for next week's discussion. So that's the first point. We have a situation where there is a misunderstanding of the county county manager. There are 2 forms of job that are being referred to as county manager intermittently. One of them is a hire that I have referred to as a glorified secretary, an executive assistant, give it what title you want. That person has no statutory authority. Under the statute, the county commissioners are responsible for the administration of this county. If they hire somebody as an administrative assistant, that administrative assistant has no statutory authority for the administration of the county, and it cannot be delegated. It is statutorily the commissioner's responsibility. As a result, there really is very little reduction in the workload for the commissioners by having an executive assistant. Unless they choose not to become informed, they still have to be informed over every vote they take, and they have to vote on every item. The commission manager form, that manager, county manager, has statutory authorities. If you want to look it up, 5103, 5301?
5301 to 5312.
5301 to 5312 tells us exactly what the authority of a commission manager, county manager, is. He is the chief budget officer. He is, and I can't remember the gamut of it. Doesn't matter at this point. He has a statutory authority, and that takes that authority away from the county commissioners and places it in the position of the manager. When you come to your speech, you can give us the list of the responsibilities of the manager. We have heard that you're going to appoint the row officials. Once again, that is a completely separate issue. There is no conflation of appointed row officials with a county manager. The county manager does not take precedence over the row officials. They are still elected officials. If they are elected officials, they still run their own departments, and the county manager has no authority over them. One other thing I'd like to comment on, Phil Ward commented about the city councils. We have heard that there's a big difference between city and county management, and I don't disagree. But there's a reason that there are city managers and city councils, and that goes back to the turn of the last century when there was so much corruption that they actually started changing the form of government in the cities to the council manager form so that they would eliminate the corruption. So when we talk about the fact that, oh, we're nothing like the cities are that way because they had problems. Does that guarantee that we're going to have problems? No. Does that guarantee we will not have problems? You've already heard several people talk about the fact that we have been embezzled. We had a person in the county clerk's office embezzle, not get caught, resign their position and leave the county, and their replacement found out, oh, hey, wait a minute, where'd all this money go? We were embezzled. So we don't have checks and balances because we don't stop people from embezzling unless we have honest people. Checks and balances are there to prevent that with the dishonest people. So, just to get this back on track, we're not talking about the county manager controlling the row officials. We're not talking right now about whether those officials should be elected or appointed. So, with that, Brian, any comments?
Just one quick one. And that's, I think, part of the problem, and I'm not criticizing your organization of how we are doing this tonight, but that's one of the problems with trying to break up each of these different topics when they really kind of go together. For example, Phil was just talking about we need a manager with control over or authority over row officials. Well, if it doesn't make sense then to have a manager who doesn't have control over those row officials. And from what Dave just said, they are not necessarily going to have that control unless we switch from electing our row officials to having them appointed. So it's kind of difficult for me to separate out the way we're doing this tonight. I understand their practicalities and we just have to live with them. But I think those distinctions are important that you just made, and I think it makes the discussion a little bit difficult, but that's just life, I guess. That's all I have to say.
Yeah, I understand what Phil was saying about them having power over. That is a separate discussion. So, Dave, comments? Nothing? Bob? Nothing? Brian? Nothing? Kurt?
I wanted to ask you to explain the designation of these discussions as action items. We talked briefly during the break. Sorry, I didn't turn the mic on. We talked briefly during the break about your designation of these discussions as action items, and I thought it was worthwhile to make sure that everybody on the commission was aware of what that implication was. Would you mind explaining to everyone for that?
The intention is that we are capable of taking these three subject matters to a vote tonight to determine as a preliminary issue where we want to go with our recommendation. So, for example, the discussion we're having right now, we could vote, and we could vote either to, again, consider and anticipate that we will recommend a commission manager form or an executive commission form, or we can decide and vote that we are not going to recommend any change in the commissioner's job. I'm hoping to be able to take all of these three to votes tonight. If we can get past the commission manager, I believe we can do so.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
Phil? Tamara?
To Bryant's point, it's hard to make a decision on the vote of the commission manager when down the road we would be talking about possibly changing elected officials to appointed, and that does change then the authority that the commission manager, it adds to it, because then that commission manager would be over that. So making a decision based on that when there's been no discussion and no deliberation on the other officials, and they are intertwined, is not a good way to progress. Because if they are being appointed, then they would be underneath the commission manager. And then I can read this now, and I will read it in its entirety, so forgive me if it's a little long. But, just put it this way so I can face you guys. Okay, the commission manager form of government, and as stipulated, is Title 31, Chapter 53. You guys can look this up. But the form of government provided in this chapter shall be known as the commission manager. Each county operating under this form shall be governed by an elected board of county commissioners and a manager appointed by the board of county commissioners, and the other officers specified in the resolution or petition from the choices provided in the sections. You can look this up, 315307 through 315312. The manager, this is 315302. The appointment of the manager shall be the administrative head of the county and shall be appointed by the Board of County Commissioners on the basis of training, experience, and administrative qualifications. The manager shall serve at the pleasure of the board and may be removed by the board at any time. The manager shall be appointed by the board as soon as practicable, but not later than 6 months after the adoption of the commission manager form of government. The board may appoint any county elected official to serve as the manager. Powers and duties. The powers and duties the manager shall have, number 1, have general supervision of the administrative functions of the county. Number 2, see that the ordinances, resolutions, and contracts of the Board of the County Commissioners are complied with and faithfully executed. Number 3, furnish the board with information concerning the operations of county departments, boards, or commissions as necessary for the board to exercise its powers or as requested by the board, and submit any other reports requested by the board or as he deems necessary. Prepare and submit an annual budget for the county to the Board of County Commissioners. The manager shall be the county budget officer and shall be responsible for the performance of the duties of the county budget officer as provided in Chapter 16, Title 31, Idaho Code, and any other provisions of law imposing duties upon the county budget officer. Number 5, keep the board fully advised of the financial condition and needs of the county. Number 6, attend meetings of the Board of County Commissioners, take a part in the discussions but not vote. and recommend measures for adoption. Number 7, exercise the executive authority of the county to appoint, supervise, suspend, and remove county personnel and make nominations and appointments to the advisory boards and committees. And number 8, perform such other duties as the board may establish by ordinance or resolution. Just so you all know what is entailed. That's all I have.
Kristen? Do we need to go around again? I'm not hearing anybody say they have further comments.
Could I suggest, in light of Brad and Tamara's points about the intertwined nature of the question about administrative authority, that perhaps we defer the question of the administrative authority and simply talk or vote advisorily on the number question, and then come back after we go through all of the other elected positions and talk about the administrative authority?
I believe that we should probably go forward with the structure of both the administration and the number at this point. If anyone has a problem, if anyone has, shall we say, buyer's remorse when we get through with it, it's very easy to bring that back up and call for a second vote. Sir?
So this is in the nature of an advisory vote, is that?
It's preliminary, assuming that nobody comes back and challenges it later, it would be in the initial recommendation.
And then if
we will be submitting to the public for public hearing.
Okay. I think it restates Tamara's point, but I'm just trying to understand her point a little bit better. And I think what it was is that, like, the sheriff and the prosecuting attorney, because they're row officials, I do my row here, but because they're row officials, and then the notion of the commission manager, as you said, right, like, it doesn't mean that the commission manager automatically embark all the row officials under them. That's a choice that we would have to recommend or whatever, right? And because sheriff and prosecuting attorney are part of that, before we get to that commission manager form, if we decide on the sheriff and prosecuting attorney, it just seems kind of out of order. Shouldn't we decide on whether a commission manager is a recommended form, and if so, who, if any, of the row elected officials gets parked under that? Does it, sequencing wise, like, I mean, you're putting the sheriff and the prosecuting attorney, I think, above the discussion, which would presumably be at the next meeting, about whether to have a commission manager form of government, right?
Well, there may be an assumption on my part as to what's going to happen with the row officials. Would anyone here like to change the order, move forward from this discussion of the administration of the commissioners and move straight into the 2 row officials that are on tonight's agenda?
I would like to do that.
Okay, anybody else? We have any problem with doing that?
But I would like, I'm sorry, I'm a little, I pause sometimes. I would like to do that because I'm understanding the concern, but then I would like to go back, and I don't want this to go to another meeting. I think we stay until midnight if we need to. But if the order helps people, then I think I have no difficulty with going with the discussion of the sheriff and prosecuting attorney first.
Is there an objection to changing the order? Let's put it that way.
No.
Dave?
I don't have an objection of changing the order. I just want to make sure I understand that this is not the final, because when I said I supported a commission manager or a concept, it was under my complete thought of how the recommendation should be.
Yes.
Okay, so if what I recommend for the row officials does not actually happen, then I may rethink the commission manager concept. So this is just like Brian said, more of a directional vote to see where we are. And once we put it all together, we'll have a final vote, which will probably be a motion that would approve this complete,
This vote,
package. Thank you.
I would anticipate that this vote would create the direction of that final package.
Right, I agree with that. But as we go incrementally, we may have to go back and make some adjustments.
I believe that that's possible. I used the phrase buyer's remorse. Perhaps that wasn't appropriate. But yes, we can go back and reconsider any aspect of this as we're drafting the preliminary report, which is to be put to the public for the public hearing.
Right.
And obviously, after the public hearing, all of this will go back into discussion again for a final vote and a final report. So with that in mind, let us jump ahead. We will come back to the commissioners after we discuss the sheriff and the prosecuting attorney. I will throw the floor open to a discussion of whether we should elect or appoint the sheriff in this way. I don't believe, from what I have heard, there is anyone here who wants to propose that we do not elect the sheriff. If I am wrong, I'm simply basing this on the comments that have been made by people. If I am wrong and anyone here wants to appoint the sheriff, then go ahead and let that person initiate the discussion. I am getting silence. I take it then that there is a consensus that we should elect our sheriff as we go forward. Is that the position of this council, of this commission?
No, I basically was gonna ask, do we need to make a motion, or how do we handle this? I am definitely for continuing to elect the sheriff, but I want to do this procedurally.
Let us have a motion.
I make a motion that we continue to elect the sheriff.
Okay? When Dave has made the notes,
Yeah, so basically, just to, we're going to continue to have the sheriff's position elected.
yes, that would be the motion. That the sheriff's
Exactly the
position
way it is now.
continue to be elected as it is
No
today.
change.
Yep.
Kurt Anderson?
Yes.
Tamara Bateson? Yes. Dave Botting, yes. Bryant Bushling?
Yes.
Brian Cleary?
Aye.
Bob Fish?
Yes.
Dave Levine?
Yes.
Phil Ward?
Yes.
Kristen Wing? Yes. It is unanimous. We are going to, in our preliminary, we are going to have the sheriff elected. Moving on to the position of prosecuting attorney, the question of election, I'm sorry. Oh, sorry. Moving on to the prosecuting attorney, the question of election or appointment. I believe, based on what I've heard, that the positions are basically the same. I don't believe anyone here has made any recommendation or made any comments that would indicate they were anticipating appointing the prosecuting attorney. If I am wrong, anyone who wishes to appoint the prosecuting attorney may speak up.
I'm not saying that, but you referenced before, which is one of our options, the possibility of offices being combined, which does include the sheriff and the prosecuting attorney under certain avenues. So when we're saying that we're going for electing the sheriff, we're also then negating that option as well. Because if they're being absorbed into
I would
another
have
office.
to look at the structure as to which offices can be combined. I am at the
Not all
moment-
of them.
not all of them, no. I am making an assumption that these two would not be combined with anything else.
Yeah, I just want to make that out there and
If we
clear.
come down to a point in the future where we're discussing the combinations, and somebody wants to combine one of these offices with one of the others, once again, if we have buyer's remorse on this vote, we can go back to it.
Okay.
Yeah, so
I don't
basically-
believe anyone's going to want to appoint the sheriff or the prosecuting attorney, even if we decide we're going to combine that with the coroner's office. Yes. Okay. Do I have a motion to continue to elect? Okay, Dave has made the motion to continue to elect the prosecuting attorney. Kurt has seconded that motion. Kurt?
Aye.
Tamara? Aye. Dave Botting, yes. Bryant Bushling?
Yes.
Brian Cleary?
Aye.
Bob Fish?
Aye.
Dave Levine?
Aye.
Phil Ward? Kristen Wing? I know I was making an assumption, but it looks like my assumptions were fairly accurate. Moving back to the discussion of the commissioners, whether to continue having them both administration and legislative, whether to relieve them of the administrative function, and looking at the number of commissioners, we are returning to that discussion.
So,
I'm sorry, who was next on the?
Well, I'm going to suggest that we continue to defer the question of administration until after we go through all of the other elected positions. Because I think that still bears, I mean, regardless of our choice on the sheriff and the prosecuting attorney, somebody may have qualms about making the coroner report to a county manager, for example. And that may affect their choice in the matter. So I think if we separate the number and maybe have the same sort of discussion or advisory focus on the number question, and then move the administration question till the end of the order, might help.
I personally would disagree. I'm open to the discussion of tabling the commission administration and moving only with number. Is there a discussion on that? Phil?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't support that. I think it's not the right action right now. All right, we know right now that if we proceed forward, 2 row offices will remain as elected officials. There are 4 others that may or may not. I mean, to really elect a coroner, that's something for us to discuss at some point in the process. But no matter whether they will remain elected or some will be appointed, I think we need to establish now there will be a manager. In conjunction with that, additional county commissioners. Again, 5 is the number that we agree on, that's fine. My own preference is 7, but I feel like we ought to go forward with looking at the number of the commissioners and a commission manager form of government.
Kristen, I think you were starting to speak.
I think that the reason the sheriff and prosecuting attorney were on this first night is because the public has made it clear that those 2 positions are very precious to them, and I think we wanted to assure them that we heard that and that they would be off the table. I would rather not postpone talking about what we've already spent almost, 3 hours talking about, because we'll be doing it all over again. I can just hear it. Next week, we're all gonna go around the room, and then we're gonna go around the room, and we're gonna do it all over again. So I would like to move forward.
Yeah, and I'm okay with moving forward with the agenda item as it is. And however, when we get to the other 4, that will be a consideration that I will value of if we decide to appoint that position, that would fall under this person, and that may sway me one way or the other. So I don't think it changes the other. We already agreed if we agree to this, we know that 17 departments would report to it. We don't know if it'll just be 17 or if it'll be 21. So I think we could still go. I think your point is, it goes back to this thing, you need a holistic view of the whole world. But I think we can get there by just simply moving forward. This, again, can be changed once we do it all.
Further comments?
That's fine. I mean, if you feel fine going through now and then revisiting it later, that's fine. I don't think everybody needs to reiterate their arguments, although they may feel the need to, if we came back next week, but.
I'm just speaking based on being, sitting around this table all these weeks.
Fair enough.
I just want it clarified, though, that we will have the ability and not here, well, we've already had this discussion and we don't need to go back and talk about this. So as long as we are fully aware that there is possibility of changes and that this will be revisited if necessary, if one person feels, and not saying, I don't think that's important or I don't think that's relevant. It's very relevant and it has repercussions, so.
Yeah, I think that's important, Cameron. I think the minutes should reflect that these votes are preliminary votes, once the entire package is put together, there'll be a final vote to go to the public, which is not a final vote, it's a preliminary final vote type of thing. Is that okay? I
A
mean,
final vote on the preliminary
yeah,
report.
right, exactly. One of those votes. But I think that is important, is because until you know the whole thing, you really don't know if it all fits together on there. So I think that's, would be appropriate, Dave, to put that in the minutes, that, and that way it'll be clear.
I'm quite comfortable with that. It's my anticipation that that is the way that we will do it anyway, yes. The objective here, we have to take things piecemeal in order to actually have an open discussion of them. If we try to talk about everything at once, we're not going to make much headway. So we take it piecemeal, we take this piece, we take this piece, we take this piece, we put it together in a package, and we can discuss the package, we can go back, I've used the phrase buyer's remorse, we can go back, and if somebody says, wait a minute, I didn't mean it that way, we can discuss it, we can vote again. I don't see an issue with that. We have to come to an agreement as a commission. Doesn't have to be unanimous, but we do have to come to an agreement as a commission on what the preliminary report will be so that we can submit that to the population, to the voters of Kootenai County, to come and give us their comments. We have a public hearing, hopefully early January, first or second week of January for that public hearing, if we can come to these decisions in a timely manner. We have to give 28 days notice of that. So if we can come to a decision in a timely manner, we can put together something, we can then note that to the public, we can have public comments, and then we can go through, we can discuss and deliberate based on the public comments, based on the public hearing, create a finalized version of the report, and submit it. Sir?
By the way, to your point about the timing, just, you know, I went to the trouble of making this whole schedule out as a tentative schedule, but I worked backwards from 1 year from when we commenced.
Right.
Right, so we commenced May 11th of 2021. So 1 year from that is really about, we want to be 5/11, it's 5/13, but you know, working back from that, you would really, the latest I think you could have that public hearing discussion is March 23rd. And then still have time for another study commission meeting, perhaps two, to finalize a report. So I just want to mention some of that, you know, if you hadn't thought through the dates.
Yeah, I want to try to bring it in sooner so that I think a lot of us are, and I know Tamara commented that she wanted to get a dark week because she was getting tired of the weekly meetings.
I don't
And
differ from you, I'm just saying.
I think it would be nice to move this forward, to get ourselves in a position, if we have a preliminary report, and I'm trying, I don't want to digress here.
Yeah, I just
But if
wanted
we
to
have a
mention it.
preliminary report by the beginning of December, we can notice that out, and we can go basically dark for December.
Yep.
We can all take a little bit of time for the holidays, including you out there. We can do that. If we don't do that, if we push ourselves to March, then we can still get it done, but we're going to have to be pushing every week again, and I think people are getting ready to take some time off.
Yeah, I mean, I actually had on our tentative calendar in September 22nd was when we were going to take action and then write and finalize and then have the hearing later on. It's working backwards and just saying, we do have that much time.
Yeah.
So
I think the writing report will take some time.
I think
Yeah.
Kristen volunteered for that.
I'm looking for someone to volunteer.
Somebody needs to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's gonna be the fun part, both reports. Oh, actually, the preliminary will be easy.
So another point, real quickly, is you cannot consolidate the sheriff and the prosecutor's office. It's repeated throughout. So if you were doubting anything about that, you can't do it. And anybody who thinks about that for 2 seconds can realize why.
Yeah.
Well,
As I said, I didn't remember
You can't
exactly.
consolidate them with each other.
Right.
But you could potentially consolidate the clerk and the prosecuting attorney, maybe.
Possibly. It just says thou shalt not conflate your sheriff and prosecuting offices.
Yes, if you want to come up with absolutely perfect scenario for corruption, put those two together.
What could go wrong?
Not a thing in the world. So, moving back to the discussion of the commission, their responsibility for administration, and the number. I can't remember exactly where we were in the circle, so let's just start again. Brian?
I think we've been around.
Does anyone have any, well, let's rephrase it then. Does anyone think they have anything that we need to hear, we need to discuss? Are we ready to move forward? If we're ready to move forward, what with? Do we have a motion?
I'm going to move that we keep the Board of Commissioners as they are and no county manager.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. No change to the government, county manager. Kurt?
Aye.
Tamara? Dave Botting? No. Bryant?
Yes.
Brian Cleary?
Aye.
Bob Fish? You want no change or no? Dave Levine?
I'm voting no.
Phil Ward?
No.
Kristen Wing?
Now you've confused, so I'm gonna state how I'm voting. I do not want to keep the current form.
That is a no vote.
No vote means that you're not.
Yeah, no, okay.
5-4, the motion has failed. Do I have a different motion?
I'll make a motion that we recommend the commission manager form of government to replace the current system.
Do we have included in that motion a suggestion on the number?
I'll go with 5 commissioners at this point.
Okay. The motion before us, is there a second? Bob will second it. Kurt Anderson?
Nay.
Tamara Bateson?
No.
Dave Botting, yes. Brian Bushling?
No.
Brian Cleary?
No.
Bob Fish? Dave Levine?
Yes.
Phil Ward?
Yes.
Kristen Wing?
Yes.
The motion is passed 5-4. With that, we have now completed the 4 positions of 4 items for new business. Items for the next meeting, we have a meeting scheduled for November 10th. The anticipation right now is the agenda would be the other 4 row officials, appointment or election. Wait until you hear the recommendation, then you can boo.
Well, you know, Brent Regan did a FOIA request and Bill Brooks and Dan Dukin were talking about him being appointed.
Him who? I'm sorry.
Let's not go there.
Yeah, let's stay out of this. The next meeting after that is November 17th. We have already talked about going dark on November 24th. November 7th, yes.
I go back, so next week, it's the other 4 row officials. Does anybody have any other agenda item that they would want us to consider so that we could finalize the agenda? So next week.
Yeah, I would like us to put a reconsideration of the entire package, however you want to phrase that. If we get through the other 4 positions, then I don't know if you want a separate consideration of consolidation or breaking up, or whether it's fair to, I mean, just maybe other discussion.
I believe as part of the discussion of the other 4, I don't believe we can consolidate or eliminate either the prosecuting attorney or the sheriff. I believe that was brought out that those cannot be consolidated. The other
Those
4,
can, not together.
Yeah.
well, then as part of the discussion of the other 4, if anyone wants to consolidate another office with the sheriff's office, that would be the discussion for next week.
So is that a separate agenda item?
Right, I would say-
No, that
Or
would
is
be,
it just
that would be,
combined?
that would be
Combined,
part of the
okay.
4.
You're just going to make one,
So the
talking
agenda item
about
will
the
be
other elected officials.
other elected officials,
Yeah,
including consolidation.
Consolidation or breakup, yeah.
Yeah,
And the
that's fair.
possibility of going back to the commission manager, because that could affect
Yeah.
these other
yeah,
positions.
I think the question for us to think about is, do we want to just next week, if we're going to meet on the 17th, I'm not sure we are, but if we meet on the 17th, should we make the 10th just trying to finalize the 4, see if we need to consolidate or whatever? Then we're done, we know what that is. Then if we want to meet on the 17th, give us a week to go and think about it, and then have a reconsideration. Or we could do it on the 10th.
That can be a determination on the 10th to decide whether or not we need to meet on the 17th
Okay.
to reconsider.
So that'll be another agenda item will be is,
Well, that would be,
Well, we are
that would go
planning to
under
meet
the
on the
following
17th.
meetings.
right, okay.
Yeah. We have been planning to meet on the 17th regardless.
Yeah, we did, but we don't know, yeah, okay.
If
so-
we don't need to, we can go dark. If we
Yeah.
need to, we can still meet on the 17th.
So everybody's okay
yes.
with just the row, the other remaining 4 row, okay, thank you.
Yes, Brian?
So at the conclusion of each of these row official discussions, right? Oh, my goodness. At the completion of the discussions as to each of the row officials and what to do, or not, we'll have a assembled recommendation package, I suppose, but then there's gonna be opportunity for closing arguments on it, is that it?
I would suggest that when we finish that, we have basically kind of a preliminary. We don't have to write that up yet. We can talk about that on the 17th as far as what that is. My expectation is that by the 1st of December, we would actually be putting together the preliminary. We would have to have that finished and available for publication by the 8th in order to have our public hearing at the beginning of January. Go ahead.
Not sure if I followed that, but I'm saying when we have finished voting on each of these different things, there'll be an opportunity preceding writing it to go
yes.
back and make a closing argument about, because I'm such a persuasive guy about why some choices may not be prudent.
Yes, I would anticipate that we would have an opportunity to reopen the discussion. So, says then the 10th, we would go over the other 4. The 17th would be open to whether or not we need to meet on the 17th. The 1st, we would, somewhere between the 17th and the 1st, we would have to have a writing subcommittee to write up the preliminary report. I envision it would be as simple as, this is what we're recommending, the commission manager form of government with 5 commissioners, and the 2 row officials we have already discussed, both elected, the other 4 row officials, whatever the discussion is next week. That would be available to us on the 1st of December. If there are any changes, we'd have to make the changes by the 8th in order to have the public hearing in the beginning of January.
And then that's just, oh, sorry, I wasn't right.
Yeah, I just, maybe it'll be more clear to me on next week, Dave. I just don't know how we're gonna write a document between the 10th, 17th, and the 1st of December with the holiday and everything.
I
So-
don't anticipate it being like a final report. I anticipate it being something that can be submitted to the public, in that we are recommending that the county commissioners place on the ballot a commission manager form of government with the 2 row officials we've already discussed, the sheriff and the prosecuting attorney, both remaining elected officials, and the other 4 being whatever we come up with next week.
Would it be appropriate next week, if we have time, to just have a little discussion on the report so we're more clear about what the scope would be?
I have no problem. Do we want to discuss that as a discussion item right now?
No.
Is there something you want to bring up?
No, I just, maybe you and I could do it offline. I'm just trying to understand, because I don't know who's gonna write it, and I know people are gonna be looking to me, and, thank you.
You're gonna have to turn your mic back on.
Okay, will you control me? Okay, I just want to make sure that we have agreement of what it should look like, the preliminary report. So having a little discussion next week, or just to have your feedback of what you think should be included, and how many pages and what kind of depth, because that's, going out to the public, it's important to explain some of the logic. If we just go and say it's gonna be the sheriff and the prosecutor's gonna be this, the other four are that, and how many commissioners there are, without any context of why it's good or bad, I mean, types of things. So I don't know, if it's just really scaled down, we could probably get it done.
Yeah.
I just wanna make sure there's clarity.
Yeah,
So I'll
I have
put
no
on
problem with
the
the
agenda,
discussion.
we'll have that on the agenda as a discussion on reports.
I'm anticipating that as being a very scaled-down item, but yes.
Okay.
Yes, Brian?
Dave, just to help you out on that, what needs to be in the report, get your pen out, is in section 315105, okay? I'm not gonna read it, but it's gonna tell you what the content is and the fact that you gotta compare it to what you have now and what you're gonna get. I will mention something that I brought up a while back in one of the meetings, because I asked it when the budget people were in here, and you said there'll be time for that later during deliberations. Where are we gonna get an answer to the question of how much the new position's gonna cost? Can we get someone from the Office of Budget, or whatever we wanna call it here, I can't remember, to give us some numbers, human resources? What's it gonna cost for a commissioner? I want some numbers. What's it gonna cost for, potentially, if the commissioner wants to staff him or herself, as the ICMA gentleman said? That may not be at first, but eventually, let's play out a budget. What does that look like? And I think if we're gonna deliberate, let's look at the numbers, because this is going to impact the bottom line of county unless you cut something else and do that kind of thing. So I just think those kinds of considerations, the details, the nitty-gritty, we're talking up here right now about, hey, should we pick this? And it goes to my point earlier, we have not looked at this in the depth that is necessary to really make an informed judgment about what we're doing. So I think numbers are needed.
I don't disagree with your comment that numbers are needed. Unfortunately, we are not going to be the ones to make that determination. The county commissioners will decide whether they are going to make $90,000 a year or $1,000 a month. We don't get that choice. They're going to decide whether they continue to get full benefits or get zero benefits. That is a decision that the county commissioners will make themselves, that we don't get to make. And as a result, when we look at the cost, we can only look at it piecemeal. We cannot look at the actual cost of the implementation, because we're not structuring that portion of the implementation.
I can agree with what you're saying in terms of, it's up to the commissioners to determine what the salary and benefits are of the commission manager, right?
And the commissioners themselves.
And what?
And the commissioners themselves.
Sure. However, Human Resources, when they were in here, said that they could do a kind of a synopsis. I'm sorry.
Salary study?
Yes, and give us an idea. We are not directing how much they should make. What we're trying to do is gather an appreciation for, on the whole, what does it generally cost for this kind of position, so that it facilitates our deliberation.
That's true. We can do that, and I believe we probably should ask that question at this point, now that we have decided that there would be an interest in a commission manager form. Up till now, we have not had that interest. Dave, do you?
Yeah, I think we should probably just get that, even though, I think it was Kurt who talked about the 1996 study group recommendations seemed to be light on one side and heavy on the other side. So I think what we would probably end up doing in a report would be, we can't tell you what the exact number is, but the range of this could be between this and this, or something like that, just to acknowledge that there is a cost. But we also need to acknowledge what we've heard from, I think it was Leanna or Nancy, is some of the jobs they have in place today may be eliminated if you get a manager to do it. So the other side of it is the potential cost, but there's also potential efficiency, so we don't know. But for the members of the public, it's important that they understand this is not a free thing. There is a cost associated with it, but we think there may be a benefit, and here are the benefits, here are the costs. And that's part of the report.
Unfortunately, the range would run some, okay, the 3 commissioners cost us, for the sake of argument, $90,000 apiece right now,
Yeah.
plus benefits. If we turn them into 5 commissioners at $1,000 a month, that's 12,000 times 5, 60,000.
Yeah.
Take that 60,000 off the 270,000, that's 210,000. The manager may run us 150,000. We have 1 set of benefits instead of 5 sets of benefits, so we now have a savings of $60,000. Alternatively, the commissioners could continue to get their pay, and it could cost us another $150,000 plus benefits.
Well, but we can
That's the
put, we
kind
can
of
put that
range
in a
that we'd be
report.
looking at.
Yeah, but we can put that in a report.
And I think that that's the kind of stuff that you just be as transparent as possible. If you think it's the right thing to do, as to my point before, I think there's a value proposition here that we have to consider, is the value of doing it. And if we don't think there's a value, even if the cost was 0, then you would probably not do it, type of thing. But if you think there is a value, and I think, at least I did, think there is a value. So I think you put that in there. We don't know, but we want you to be aware that these are considerations you should think about when you go to vote on this. That's all you're trying to do, is provide as much clarity as you possibly can.
Since our county commissioners are elected, I it's probably not far-fetched to think that the voters would not appreciate if they've had 80% of their job handed off to a county manager, that they would still decide that they should be paid $90,000 a year. So even if Dave is right, we can't determine that. We can make a recommendation, and I think if they look out at counties that have more than 3, they'll find that, and anyone else is welcome to go out and look at it too, but none of the ones that I contacted did anyone make anything but a minimal salary, because they recognize that theirs is a very part-time position. So as Dave said, looking at it, I actually think that at the worst case scenario is it would be a wash. But now you look at the cost-benefit analysis. What do you get for your dollars? And I think I think that our HR director here is very competent. She knows how to do those salary surveys. Perhaps 1 or 2 of us who have some experience in this could work with her, or perhaps you just would prefer that you get information from her directly. But I think if we're asking someone who's currently an employee to do this for us, we need to make sure that they understand the big picture, because otherwise we're not going to get, or the structure that we're looking at. Otherwise we're not going to get numbers that have any meaning. Because it is true, we've heard back from the discussion, either county commissioners or some of the deputies saying, well, this is just gonna cost too much money. Well, no, you gotta look at the whole structure, and probably it doesn't, and you might get more bang for your buck.
Nancy, would you do us the favor of requesting a salary survey? Thank you. Further discussion on the agendas of future meetings? Shall we adjourn? It's only 8:45. We've still got plenty of time.
Yeah, but there's nothing else on the agenda.
No, there's nothing else on the agenda. I haven't even heard a motion. Did we get a motion? Oh, Phil moved. Who seconded? Bob seconded. Vote for adjournment? We are adjourned.